Let's get started. Welcome back. I'm Winter, and it's been too long. No, not since the last time you watched me, though thanks for fixing that. No, hopefully not since the last time you played StarCraft 2. Though, let's be more realistic, watched. No. It's been too long since the last time we delved into the depths of the StarCraft 2 leagues. The densely packed darkness filled with tenacious Terrans, bold Protoss, and relentless Zergs, all climbing and clawing and shooting and charging and dropping and nuking their way up the ladder in order to achieve whatever scrap of glory they're looking for, or at least throw it in the face of Kevin on Discord, who got Diamond and Wings of Liberty and has been coasting off that accomplishment for 10 years. No, an accomplishment is not Diamond 10 years ago. An accomplishment is getting a little bit better today. 2 years ago, I attempted to show with the low APM challenge that working smarter and not harder is the most efficient way to improve. That with just a relatively small time commitment, but a medium brain commitment, you can improve at the most difficult 1v1 game in the world. I think I succeeded at that. But, as always, with StarCraft 2 and in general, you can do a little bit better. So I'd like to introduce the 2022 Low APM Challenge. In combination with SC2 replay stats, I will be, over the next weeks and months, and however long it takes, showing you, as each race individually, Terran, Zerg, and Protoss, as opposed to allowing the random gods to dictate our fates, how to get a little bit better. I will once again attempt to climb the ranks, working smarter and not harder. And over the last 2 years, not too much has changed in StarCraft 2. No huge balance patches. The maps are similar. The player count as well. So, while the best time to start was with Kevin back in Wings of Liberty, the second best time to restart or start StarCraft 2 is today. Because at the end of the day, there is nothing more difficult or satisfying in gaming. It's honestly less of a game and more of a lifestyle. I've made it mine for 12 years now, and hopefully you've enjoyed sharing it with me. So hopefully you enjoy the Low APM Challenge number 2 in 2022, and hopefully it makes many of your days and your games a little bit better. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the other side. Good luck. Have fun. Stay tuned. So you want to play Protoss. Many have tried, but not all succeed. Protoss is the butt of many jokes and frustration, with access to the most powerful units, but also the most technical builds. It can be both the easiest and most difficult. In terms of sheer actions per minute, statistically, according to SC2 replay stats, Protoss doesn't require quite as much. Now, you might be like, aha, I knew it. But think about it as their minimum supply for army units is 2, as opposed to half a supply for Zerglings or 1 for Marines. But almost every Protoss unit... Jimmy, can we turn down the Terran music? It's really kind of ruining the vibe here, but we'll get to it. We'll figure that out. But Protoss doesn't need to be full of cheeses and rushes and all sorts of frustrating things. It can be just as solid and stable as the other races. I think even though that stereotype exists, and it exists for a reason, that doesn't mean you can't do a solid macro build like Showtime. Not everyone has to play like Haz or Zest, and if you don't know who any of those players are, well, welcome to StarCraft 2, and I hope to teach you something. Our lesson plan. Now, this is not the only things we'll be talking about, but these are the major focuses through the Meta Leagues. As we get to Diamond, it's going to be all of this and more, but that's a long way off. To start out, in the Bronze League, Unranked, the Bronze League, and through Silver. How to expand at all. Building probes, building pylons, where we're putting pylons. Those are all things that I think a lot of especially newer players struggle with, even though they seem simple. And how many? What upgrades to get? Why? Stuff like that. When I'm scouting, like I'm sending a probe out there, I thought the probe was just supposed to be an intimidation tactic that the other races will assume is doing some sort of cheesy build. And oftentimes assuming correctly, but still, no, there's more to it than that. Some of the more specific and somewhat complicated mechanics that are unique to Protoss. Warp Gate, Chrono Boost, Recall, Shield Batteries, the half a dozen spellcasters you have to interact with just to... and that's just gateway units. And of course, the tech tree and forges, once again, do not count as part of the tech tree. Though they can add to it. That doesn't mean we're going to be shying away from, let's put designated pressures, it's been called. And a lot of players will feel obligated to attack Protoss early, so making sure we have basic micro and ability use, we know how to counter certain builds, and, now this is somewhat unique to Protoss in my opinion, is it's more important to have a matchup-specific build, whether you're up against Zerg or Terran or Protoss. Literally, where you put your buildings becomes very relevant. So that is something we're going to be going over as well. And then, as we make our way higher, the what tech to go for, when to attack, the late-game army and control, and then, of course, all the little timings and stuff to watch out for. When does a Widow Mine drop happen? When should my DTs be in his base? How many cannons should I build? And other relevant questions. So, and the requirements. This is the low APM challenge. So, with over 1 million games last year of Protoss on SC2 replay stats, these numbers are all less than the average APM of Protoss, sometimes by a significant margin, though Diamond is a little more estimated. 50 actions per minute in the Bronze League, 60 in Silver, 70 in Gold, 80 in Platinum, and then 100, 110, 120 getting through Diamond. But starting out, we're focusing on the fundamentals. And what is the punishment? No, it's not just the idea. Every 5 APM I go over, unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, get the occasional stream sniper and all that. Every 5 APM, I'm going to have to gift a sub to the Twitch chat. Now, the people who aren't subbed, do they deserve it? About as much as those cheesy nerds who sneak a win off you. No, they don't. But they're going to have a chance at it. So it will cost me. Because the low APM challenge is about working smarter and not harder. And I think Protoss is the easiest to show the difference here, because there's a lot of stuff you don't need to do as Protoss as long as you focus on the right things. And if that wasn't enough buzzwords for you, hotkeys, settings, tips, and tricks. Maybe one quick one or more before we jump in. So, well, since we're doing each race individually, you may have skipped the Terran Low APM challenge. I will, if there are questions I see cropping up, either on YouTube or in Twitch chat, we're going to do some Q&A throughout. You'll probably see that tagged. And I will, in further videos, be seeing any questions, collecting questions from those who can't watch, because I'm essentially a vampire when I stream. So, I'll go over some of the hotkeys we changed. You know what? I'm actually going to be making a new hotkey profile. We're going to take it from the top here. Now, I want to be clear. I think grid hotkeys are fine. I've actually come around from being neutral. I think grid hotkeys are good for players to start out with. I, though, have played for many years, and many of you may have played years ago, or months, or however long, and may have decided on standard hotkeys. So there are a few things, not necessarily specific to Protoss, but just a few different hotkeys I like to change in general. First is camera locations. Camera locations. So I started out playing Zerg the most, and that's how I learned camera locations for Queen injects. But it's actually just incredibly helpful to have camera locations on each of your... I usually have my starting 4 bases. Occasionally, I get real creative, and I use camera locations on other bases, or other locations as well, like maybe a proxy pylon or something like that. But overall, I usually have them limited to the first 4. So Control F2 through F5 are what I use. Not F1, because that is the idle worker key, which is definitely something that sees a lot of use, even as Protoss. And then to jump over to those camera locations, F2, and then, I mean, you see where this is going. F4, F5. So, and I think, well, camera location hotkeys are something that grid doesn't cover. Most of the rest are things that if you're on grid hotkeys, you can kind of safely ignore. But these are things outside of that grid. Let me see. Oh, one more thing. I'm not going to go over it much now. Well, select army units I like to have on tilde, because as you saw, I just unbound F2. Because back in my day, we didn't have the select all army hotkey. All right? We had to box select a bunch of units and get a bunch of probes in the group, and then we had to figure out how to get rid of the probes, and then the units are over on the... So, when the Select Army came out, in Heart of the Swarm it was added, I was already using the F2 key for camera location, so even then I feared change. One more thing is choose a ability or AI target. Now, this is for rapid-fire hotkeys, which your most obvious use is Corrosive Bile. You'll see that the most. I'm going to put it on C, which overlaps with Corrosive Bile. I'm not actually going to be using rapid-fire, but I'm just putting that in your head. I have a few short videos on that, literally 1 minute long, explaining what it does, in case you're interested, but I don't think it's something that's particularly important starting out. All right, now for units. Patrol, one of those key RTS mechanics that every top-tier game has, or even some of the others. But patrolling your units just makes it a little easier, especially for air units, but also to keep workers off idle hotkeys. Patrol has a lot of obvious and less obvious uses. I like to put it on Q. Once again, if you're on grid, you'll be fine. But I use Q for the patrol key. Now, for building things, do I change anything up? I've messed around with putting the Cyber Core on a different key before and stuff like that, but overall, building stuff is pretty intuitive. All the buildings are things you're usually only going to make once, even if they are on more difficult keys, so I don't find myself ever switching that. The only things I do change are things that are solved by grid, which... instead of Immortals on I like to have Q as an alternate key. Actually, I should just have it as the only key. So I don't get into bad habits there. Because I is pretty far along on the keyboard. That's some Brood War style of like, Marine goes on M because that's the key it starts with. How did they make what would become the premier esport in the entire world? But at the same time, they're like, probe goes on P. Like, Brood War, just quite a cornucopia of ups and downs with that. Technologically and just in principle. Another one is Phoenixes. This one is a little on cue. So, let me see. I'm probably going to forget one or two things here, but otherwise, no, that seems about right for now. Phoenixes are another one I sometimes struggle to build, but not a huge deal either way. And I didn't actually go over this. I believe the only hotkey I have unbound is push to talk, which... Wouldn't it be interesting if you could talk to your enemies and also voice chat wasn't broken? StarCraft comes from a time just a few years before everybody used like Discord or Skype. So back when every game had its own voice chat as opposed to third-party voice chats being as universal. So a few gameplay settings. I've already set them here, but I'm just going to go right through them real quick. Show alerts, see the things on the left side. Display build grid, this is extra important for Protoss. Always show worker status. And uncheck enable simple command card, because that hides some of the options, including stuff like hold position in the bottom right. If you're wondering why you don't have all the same things, that's why. The game thinks you're simple. I think there's a chance it's wrong. Show current order indicator, obviously. Select all larva, not really relevant here. Enable enemy unit selection is something that's actually disabled by default. Obviously, that's very important. And display XP. So this one might be a little weird. Like, you get XP, you level up. It's irrelevant, except for a few, like, portraits and stuff. But the XP animation shows up for longer than the usual death animation, even if you're on fancy graphics like me. So you can get a better judge of exactly how many workers you killed, or if you weren't looking exactly at the fight, you have a better idea of how much was killed. This is more personal preference. I like having it, but I'd say personal preference on that one. And then, unit life bars. I think damaged or always are your choices. I've come around to damage life bars. I used to use always life bars, but I think damage gives you a little more clarity, because it's only when units are not at full HP. The only awkward part is when units are at full energy, the energy bar no longer shows. I'd love an option that was damage plus energy, so you could see your Templar have 200 energy, but you do get used to it. But this is definitely personal preference. Control groups, I usually have them on normal. Unclickable is something I switch to if I accidentally click them, because there's no reason to ever be clicking them. Show flyer helper, always. This is not optional. I see so many players miss their storms, miss their corrosive biles, miss even their EMPs, because the unit in the air has a different place on the ground because of the way it works. Because of the way it is, all right? I'm not going to get into technical terms. But the actual area on the ground you need to aim your abilities is slightly different than aiming at the unit in the air. So that will give you a little indicator of where that unit is. Now, another thing is turning up scroll speed on your mouse. Drag scroll, mouse scroll, technically keyboard scroll as well. I like to keep it at a nice high number. It's by default 20%. 20% is too low for 90% of people. It is far too low. It is why it feels like such a struggle to move around. This is personal preference, but I'd play around with it. Actually, I should have mouse sensitivity at 51%. I don't know if it's still a thing. Disable Windows key. I don't know if it's still a thing that your mouse is more precise when it's on like a non-even number, but I remember Day 9 saying something like that 12 years ago, so it must still be true, right? As for graphics, I mean, you gotta show off the game. I think it still looks great. this is all personal preference, but the big hits to your graphics and performance are shadows, reflections, and effects. If you're going to have anything, you're going to want models and then texture quality as high as possible. Everything else you can get rid of, but models and texture quality essentially make your units look very sharp and your enemies' units look very sharp with very little clutter and aren't huge hit to performance. So I also like enable additional team colors, which you can turn all the way up to 11, and it makes everything brighter essentially. You got colorblind mode as an option here, which I should probably be using for this, but and one more important thing is unchecking this, which is auto join play mode chat, which will auto join the general chat upon login. So unless you're being honest with yourself and amused by the hive of scum and villainy that is general chat, and you're wondering why you're looking at it, you can just uncheck that. Also, if you're playing on the North American server, you can choose from one of these beautiful American countries and servers, all the way from New York to Singapore. So now this doesn't mean you'll always get the server, but if essentially like it will try to prefer your server if possible. It doesn't really affect who you play against, but if they're on best match and you're on Central US, it'll usually be Central US. So that's a little, you can definitely feel the difference between Singapore and Central US depending on where you're from. If you're on Europe, there's only the beautiful country of Europe server. Asia has a couple options as well, but just know this is here. And then for replays, game tooltips, just default interface is actually very strong. So there you go. We went through it all. And now we might actually play the game. Maps. So these were our Terran vetoes. These were the vetoes of the 3 maps that don't really fit the cookie cutter, the standard. And we're going to keep them that way. Because the idea was not, these are maps that are good for Terran. These are maps that are different. And both, Protoss even more than Terran, struggles with essentially maps like Pride of Altaris, Blackburn, Beckett Industries. You need to have eventually, not at this level, not starting out, but you have to have eventually a different style and build a lot of the time because they're such a different way they play out. So if you want some variety in life, you want to spice things up, well, you know how to do it. But we're here to be boring, safe, and solid. So remember what we're focusing on, not that. Where's our lesson plans, Jimmy? Yes. We're going to be starting out learning a basic expansion, probes and pylons, and when and where to build them. And just generally, I can already give you. You're going to want 50 workers by 7 minutes. That's what we're aiming at. We're up against Terran. Here on Berlingrad. So I'm going to try to just give you the basics. Now with the low APM challenge, I'm not going to be covering everything every game. Like, it's going to be a few games till we cover all the basic parts. But it's supposed to give you an idea of something you can maybe emulate or work off of in your own games. And understand, now this is a misconception, that in SC2 you have 5 placement matches. So
you got this. One way or
what
another.
that means is you're ranked after 5 placement matches. What I'm going to start recommending, just because it's so misleading, is people leave their league, which is something you can do, and then play their placement matches again a second time. Because you actually are not truly ranked until about 25 matches in. Until then, you're going to be gaining and losing like 3 digits almost of MMR. So that's because you're in your post-placement matches. The system essentially doesn't know where you're supposed to be yet, though it did try to place you already. And that's why it will sometimes feel like you're up against obviously overmatched opponents. I mean, sometimes that will happen, but for about 20 to 25 games, if you've never played before, or if you haven't played in several seasons, you could be up against anyone from bronze to diamond, really. And I think that I do have a 5-minute or so video explaining the MMR system, what matters, what doesn't, how it works. And if you're wondering why you're playing the opponents you're playing, I would recommend checking that out. Alright, so what did we start with? I'm doing a expand build. I started with a pylon next to where my assimilator is, not next to my nexus. I put a gateway out there, and now I'm starting a cyber core. So I spent most of the early game talking about the matchmaking system. We'll go over the build in the next one. But now I'm going to get a nexus. You might be like, but he has 3 barrack. I don't care. He's on 1 base. Okay, so what that means is we need the basics. Put a pylon out in front here. I'm going to start with an adept. Get my second gas after getting the second pylon. And this is my Builder Probius. Very important. Builder Probius. I put it on the 2 key. So since I saw you had a bunch of barracks, what we're going to build is a robotics facility. That's the first thing. It's very important to know what tech you're going to want when your cyber core finishes. So what's going to happen is you build that cyber core right after the gate finishes up. And then when the cyber core finishes, you'll be heading towards 3 digits of gas. So a robo's 100 gas, a Stargate and a Twilight. Well, a Stargate's 150 and a Twilight is 100. Against someone who's sitting on 1 base, I recommend a robotics facility. What we're going to do, now that my robo is in the yellow, I'm going to build more gates. There's going to be a lot of this. I don't like doing builds that are exactly this supply or reacting to exactly what your opponent is doing. I like finding anchors, other timings that you can use to reference. So my cyber core is finished, I start my tech. My tech is halfway done, I get more gates.
Research is
my warp gate is finishing, I add extra pylons. Stuff like that. It's not going to be the same every game, but if you get in the habit of doing one of these things and you're thinking about the others, well then now you're in the habit of doing several of these things. So I built 2 shield batteries. I would have built 1 shield battery anyways. We're going to use shield battery overcharge here. Warp in some more adepts. For every base more that you have than your opponent, I recommend building another battery. Every time you expand, I recommend building a... Can we turn this... It's so loud. The sound of those Marines being slaughtered is so loud. So I built 1 observer. What I'm going to do is poke in while I'm building probes. Observer, probes. Observer, probes. 2 things you don't usually think of together. But observer, probes. Okay, observer. He's got barracks. He's building Marines. We've dealt with that. I'm going to put it out at the front the observer. I'm going to shift click and press the E button for surveillance mode, which sieges up the observer and immobilizes it. It gives you a little more vision, and you're not going to easily unhotkey it or move it out of position. So this way we can see things like another group of Marines. It appears he's pulling the boys here as well. So we're going to just keep adding shield batteries. I'm going to chrono boost my gateways, and I'm going to get supply blocked, is what I'm going to do. That's my favorite part. Make sure we have a couple pylons as well at the front. But with shield battery overcharge, I got a robotics bay, which I should have done earlier, but we're doing the absolute basics here. Chrono boost a Colossus. So Chrono boost works on everything. Using your Nexus energy is it takes a little getting used to. But Chrono boost is a big part of most build orders. So generally you should Chrono boost those marine or those probes once after your first pylon finishes, and I'm just going to give you a timing and say once after your second pylon finishes. Because then you're very unlikely to be supply blocked. I don't know if that was the boys, but with a Colossus here, we should have what it takes. And where are we at? We're at 50 probes. 50 probes by 7 minutes was the goal. I barely got there. But if you can get 50 probes by 7 minutes, you're already, honestly,
and it's not coming back.
In the meta leagues, most players never even get 50 probes. And if they do, it's accidentally 25 minutes in, right? So I'm going to build a Nexus. I'm going to build some pylons around it. It's important. Well, guess I'm not building a Nexus. As Jimmy came up with something clever, I thought, after we did some Terran low APM challenge. Wait, Jimmy, do we have the meme here? Ah, yes. Of course. So, as you can see, coming through strong here.
Field depleted.
But
Mind out of that cluster.
We're going to be starting out. Our starting unit composition is going to be Stalker, yes, some Stalkers, Zealot, Colossus. All right? Stalker, Zealot, Colossus. I know. If you've ever watched Angry Coach, you know I'm not a big fan of Stalkers. This is because a lot of people use Stalkers as the main damage option. Stalkers are good with Colossi because they share a relatively long range. So that keeps them out of the fray a lot. But the focus essentially playing Protoss a lot of the time is like building a computer. You need all the key parts to be good. All right? Like, you don't want, like, no matter how good, you can have 128 terabytes of RAM, but if you don't have a processor, it's not going to work good. The Colossus is the processor, and that's as far as this analogy is going to go.
Your warriors are under attack.
So, usually I wouldn't worry too much about this if it was on his side of the map. This may not be his only base. An important thing as well is knowing that
Army under attack. Select all and pass.
Just because it's there doesn't mean you need to attack it. Alright? I waited until I had at least 2 Colossi, until I spent a round of Warpins. Honestly, shutting down those early attacks has already put us in a very good spot. But I should have taken another base off to the side. But there's no reason to tech switch right now. Instead of going for now what a lot of players their instinct will be at this stage. I'm just commenting on what I've seen is to start building stargates. It is not the time for Void Race. It is the time to make sure I have plenty of ground units. So we're gonna get a Twilight. How many gateways do I have? Let me introduce you to the Warp Gate hotkey. Did you know that you can select all of your warp gates with a convenient key? The W key by default. So you can bind it to whatever you want. And this is why I do not have them on a control group, because I just use the warp gate key. So with the warp gate key, I can warp in, add some more stalkers here. And at this point, I'm going to focus on maxing out. Alright, that's what we're going to do. Get some more Colossi. Here's another thing I would like you to get in the habit of, because I only just started doing this like a year ago, which is 1/12 of the time I've played StarCraft, is shift-clicking your upgrade buildings into your main base key. This isn't just for Protoss. Terran and Zerg as well. But what I can do, instead of having either to come back home and click it, I can put both the Forge and the Twilight, neither of which produce units. Their only purpose is to get upgrades. Tab, +1 attack. Tab, charge. Let me move my face a little here. But yeah. So, that way, in the same action as building probes, you can continue your upgrades. Makes it a little bit easier to get in the habit of keeping those up. And frees up control groups and all that. Thank you, Aviator, for the raid. I would say the maximum warp gates you want to have is 50. If you're wondering, how many warp gates should I get? I have all this money. It's 50. But how about one page? All right, how many warp gates go on one page? 24. For those who don't know, it's 3 rows of 8 on the selection box down here. So with 3 rows of 8, I think at that point, you're probably maxed out. I know it sounds ridiculous to say 50, and it is a ridiculous number. But it is better to have 50 warp gates than to build 50 cannons. I think getting in the habit of spending your money on production is the most important thing, especially Protoss players who have some of the most convenient static defense options. That's how I'll put it. Since they have some of the most convenient static defense options, a lot of players will fall into the trap of only focusing on that.
Research all done.
Alright, we got charge. Here's your opportunity. I'm not going to go super in-depth about rapid fire, but I will show you what rapid fire can be used for Protoss. I know, this is don't... Warp gate, I'm adding an alternate key, C.
Upgrade complete.
For Zealots.
But at what cost?
And remember, I've set AI or ability target to also be C, which means wherever I hold the C key and I have my mouse, it will use the C key. Which allows you to quickly and easily warp in units. Many top-tier Protoss have gone into their hotkey files. You actually have to do it out of game. And added more rapid-fire keys so they can do the rapid-fire warp-in on different hotkeys for Stalkers and Adepts and all that. I do use this for creep tumors. Actually, I use it for... when I'm playing the mediocre games I do play. I use it for Ghost Snipe, Liberator Siege, I use it for Purification Nova, for Disruptors, though that can go wrong sometimes. I use it for Warping and Stalkers, Adepts as well. I use it... Creep Tumors, of course, is a relatively easy one. You might have seen Serral spreading 10 Creep Tumors instantaneously. That's how. Obviously, Corrosive Bile, that's the classic use.
You're all mined out of that mineral field.
I want to actually take this time before we go and attack in and explain positioning of cannons and shield batteries.
An upgrade's been completed.
So, you can block your minerals with buildings. It's possible to do so. But this isn't Brood War. You don't need to build your cannons outside the base. I think if you're setting up a new base, having a nice Triforce setup is ideal. Because cannons can only cover so much area. You see that little indicator. If you aim for the little gaps, this will it barely affects the mining at all, and you cover most of the mineral line, especially relevant against Xur. And then if you're going to build shield batteries
in that geyser, but cannons only cost minerals.
In locations like this. The shield batteries are less relevant because they're for your units, not for attacking. So they don't need to be usually in the mineral line. But if you're setting up a base, don't be afraid. It takes some getting used to. But this way, because I do see a lot of what I call Brood War cannons. Because back in the Brood War, workers were not smart creatures. And if there was a pebble in between them and the minerals, usually they'd just probably go run off into a reaver or something. But we don't worry about that anymore. Alright. Let's go see. Looks like our Terran hero here enjoys Marines. The Zealot's having a tough time. Let's get those hotkeys. Tab. GA. Ground, attack, and armor. I could tab to the Twilight and get Blink or something. I'm deliberately avoiding Blink because then I'll be encouraged to use Blink, which is not a good idea. Well, so I think it's very unlikely that was his last base. So you can take your guesses. All right, we're going to learn and reinforce the idea of shift-clicking units. So, how do you send units to a base without ruining everything? Or using select all army key. So I bet he's in this top corner somewhere. I'm going to 8-click my whole army. 8-click. I'm going to tab, tab, tab. I'm now on the Zealots. Smaller armies are easier. Shift-click 2 Zealots. Control 1. So those 2 Zealots should go that way. Same thing over here, but we're going to use a different method. Just click on those units. Let's see. He was building a command center in the corner. Shout out to B-Steel, though. Still taps out the GG. I think before you worry, another important thing is, before you worry about hunting down every last thing they have, the focus should be on maxing out your general army at this stage. Eventually we're going to learn Immortals, Archons, and Charge Lots. Just remember that. Right now we're starting with Colossus Stalker as a very baseline. But Immortals, Archons, and Charge Lots will quickly become our go-to army. But Colossus Stalker is probably the simplest, relatively mid-game army you can build. Covers everything. but don't get too tied to it, because they are not as efficient once you come up against players who build more than, just Marines. Can you put this whole thing on YouTube? I got great news for you. Just for you, Jimmy Russells. I will. So, overall, 50 probes by 7 minutes. Get your extra gateways when Warp Gate is halfway done or your tech is halfway done. The most important thing to build after your cyber core is your tech, unless you're actively dying. And Forge does not count as tech. It's more intimidation. So, let's see. Did we succeed? The limit, 50 APM. There you go. Macro Master. I don't think the game would lie to me, would it? We did. Managing to come in 1 APMs under our Terran hero. Though credit to him, I gotta say, some bold moves there. And no sarcasm at all. Like, I want to be clear, even though my face and my words and much of the things you're used to me saying are maybe not entirely unsarcastic, but it is pretty great to see players like this. I want to be clear. What I did is what I recommend for many of the people who are getting a little frustrated with placement, is you leave League. Yes, it's essentially kind of deranking, but if you're getting, until you've played at least 15 games, the system doesn't know where you are. Can you expect playing 5 random games to get you a good idea of where your MMR is? Especially, like, if another player happened to be doing the same thing, it's not going to work. I wouldn't trust a system that thought it knew where it was after 5 games. So just know, until you've played 20 or 25 games, if your MMR is significantly lower than the league you ended up in, well, maybe try leaving League and taking those placement matches again, and you'll be a little more targeted. But back in my day, I lost 75 of my first 100 games or so. I placed into the goddamn Silver League, where I played several hundred games before I learned how to do a 2 medevac siege tank marine drop on some of the worst maps where you could drop in like 4 seconds to their base, and then I got to play them. But, so, if you play 5 or 10 games and you're wondering, like, seems like a lot of people are better than me. Well, thank God, because if in 10 games you could compete with your average StarCraft player, this game wouldn't be nearly as exciting. Oh yes, this is it's a good time to explain super pylons. Instead of actually showing you in game, just unrelated, just switching gears here. So, this is a pylon. Instead of showing you in game, where it'd be way easier. Here's a pylon. All right, that's a pylon. So this pylon actually is sad. Why? Because it does not have a gateway or a nexus nearby. If your pylon is lonely with no friends, it is not motivated to warp in units very fast. It takes about 11 seconds to warp in a unit. Without a warp conduit is the name of it. But if it has a friend, like a nexus or a gateway, then it turns that frown upside down and it becomes a warp conduit. And it takes only about 4 seconds to warp in. So that is what a super pylon is. You'll see the indicator. A nexus only has to be about a quarter of the way done to be a super pylon. Or not even a quarter. Like after the nexus has been building for just a few seconds, it becomes a warp conduit for any pylons next to it. And it has to be a warp gate, not a gateway. Warp prisms by default are warp conduits. They are super pylons in and of themselves. Yeah, back in my day, everything was a super pylon, and you could warp to the high ground from the low ground. And you could build 3 pylons at the bottom of someone's ramp because we didn't have the destructible rocks there, and you could get cannon rushed from the bottom of your ramp, and that was great. Not everything was great back in Wings of Liberty. Yeah, that is why, for those wondering, those destructible rocks at the bottom of the ramp, that is because you used to be able to put 3 pylons or 2 bunkers down there. Looks like we have a repeat performance from the guy who was a big fan of the stream last time. Which leaves us in quite an awkward position.
Here we go again.
But we will try to fight it out. So, I'm going to start walling off the ramp. That's what we're going to start doing against Zerg. So, the reason why, 1, 4-player maps are not much of a thing in StarCraft 2, and why Protoss has the most technical build orders is because even the placement of your very first pylon is very important. So if you don't know what race they're playing at the higher levels, well, it becomes very difficult to, because your first gateway and your cyber core go on your first pylon, right? So that means you're in an awkward spot. If you thought they were Zerg and they're Terran, well, now you've got kind of a tough position. Oh, should have been a 17 assimilator. A little late on that. Once I use expanding. Getting a cyber core as this finishes. We're going to get a nexus on the low ground and immediately get that second pylon. We need to not be afraid of building on the low ground. Have Probius go over there. Gonna get another gas geyser now. This is the time to chrono boost more workers. And the first unit is going to be an adept. Going to get all this gas, rally to the second base. We're putting the Adept up on the high ground for now, but we cannot be afraid of taking the second base. I'm taking the robotics facility. And now, in a slight exception to the build, because we're up against Zerg, I'm going to get those 2 extra gates. Honestly, it's hard for me to tell, so just to be straight up, this guy is actually gold, and he's been stream sniping multiple times throughout the series, and I forgot to account for that. So I am doing a little bit of a more fleshed out build at the moment. Not that it's a particular concern, it's just he does not play as your average lower Metal League player does. But we're essentially sticking with the same build, the same style.
Your research is complete.
if we play him again, I will show an expedited strategy with less restrictions. That is the plan, I think. So, I mean, I guess something to look forward to. So the observer, remember, probes, observer. Probes, observer. I'm watching the observer, but I'm building probes. We see a lair, a roach warren. I'm going to start a Colossus. We're at nearly 50 probes, which means it is time. Hotkeying this as a builder probe, right-clicking on the mineral patch, so I'll mineral walk through. And then building a nexus with a nice pylon tucked in. Gonna shift-click the observer into surveillance mode. Get another warp in here of stalkers. And as I get my third, and before 6 minutes, we're going to try to make sure we have that forge. Going to build one shield battery in front and behind the base. Make sure I have an adept on hold position. So here's a nice thing about going for Colossi, is they can just walk over the adept. And technically, they can see the Overlord on the pervert pillar. That's not a big deal. So, at 55 probes, 5 more gates. Yes. 50 to 60 probes. I would say 50 probes is a good time to add. Honestly, 50 probes is a big time for everything. It's for adding more, another base, adding production. This is because you now have enough to support 2 bases. I'm going to get the +1. And we'll build more probes, but the priority is having production. So, advanced tactics, but very important to get used to, is having at least 1 sentry in the army. We're not going to be using force field. We're probably not going to be using hallucination. For those scouting phoenixes or any fancy American Zerg destroying place. No. Guardian Shield. Guardian Shield reduces range damage to friendly units by 2. So roaches, hydras, lurkers, mutas, marines, essentially everything but Zerglings and Banelings is what it reduces damage from. And that's kind of a huge deal.
You engage the enemy. On purpose.
Force field is something we'll worry about a little later on, but just having a Guardian Shield in each fight can be... It is probably one of, if not the most valuable spells in the game.
A mineral field has been depleted.
Alright. I'm going to actually build another robotics facility. I'm going to get some more pylons. Moving around, make some spotter pylons. Some more pylons in the main.
Mind out of that cluster.
I see an opportunity to chrono boost. Oh yeah, I don't have it on the hotkey. Twilight Council. So the Twilight Council is more for getting +2 attack rather than Twilight Council upgrades, though. Can't hurt. Alright.
Mineral field depleted.
What are we at? 75 probes. That actually 80 is the max. We don't want to go above 80. We got one of those good problems. So, 4th base. Gonna use that second robo, get a few observers. Make sure we have them with the army. I'm just shift-clicking into everything here. Chrono boost. Another round. Is there a probe down here? Yes. So we're going to get those. well-placed cannons, and get a few cannons at the front. You want to have at least one shield battery. Oh, the attack. So the nice thing about sentries is they will be prioritized over other units. Learning... Unfortunately, there's no way to customize the priority of spellcasters. But if you have if you have this army, sentries will always be the priority unit. They'll be the first thing that comes up when you click on them. Templar will take priority over them if they're in your army. We'll be adding some Templar in later on. But for now, just the sentries, the stalkers, and the colossi.
Your forces are just a little bit better.
So, I'm almost maxed out. What does that mean? It's time to check my economy. I'm going to move some probes over.
You took all the minerals from that
I'm going to
cluster,
get another Nexus. I'm going to chrono boost those upgrades. I'm going to get a Dark Shrine as a later game option.
Your base is
and...
crumbling under enemy
Oh.
attack.
Huh, that's a small attack. Which means the rest of his army is probably somewhere else. But we got distracted. The last thing is more gateways. I'm going to at least 12 if I didn't have as much money, but instead just... And this is why setting up your pylons, like, you don't have too many pylons too early, but having a nice pylon spread, it's just something to get a feel for. It's hard to describe exactly the best ways. You can just outright copy what I'm doing, but the idea is to have pylons in areas where they're, you see, warp conduit, but also spread out enough to be able to build static defense, warp in, make it so it doesn't hurt you more than it helps you. So, let's get those last few stalkers. We've got observers in case of lurkers. And if it is lurkers, I mean, we can get blink here. Alright, Guardian Shield. And warp in some more. Control, click, Shift 1 is what I'm doing with that. Not using Select Army hotkey, but Control to select all the stalkers on the screen, and then Shift 1 to add them to Control Group 1. Upgrades can be chrono boosted. The Observer. Spot some Hydras. How do you avoid sending obs ahead of the army? It's a good question. Honestly, if I thought there was a risk of losing them, the best way is to use surveillance mode. Like right now, I could control click the observers, put them on a different hotkey. That's the best way to do it, but that's hard to always do. I'm going to make sure. Sometimes I like to just have one in surveillance mode and one with my army. Just make sure I have, like, if I'm about to go attack, just put one in surveillance mode so you have a reserve, such as it is. Yeah, the best way is to have a different hotkey, but it is a little finicky to control. Surveillance mode is one of the few additions to the game that was actually something for top tier players because it gives you slightly more vision. And for less accomplished players because the select army and control group don't get affected as much.
We're all mined out of that mineral field.
So, if it was a little closer, the few things I might need are a Stargate. Yes, we will be playing Sky Toss at some stage here. But I don't think going Sky Toss for the sake of going Sky Toss is great. Remember, we're trying to build and learn. And I think trying to turtle, as we explained in the Terran low APM challenge, that just sitting back and trying to defend does not teach you. What teaches you is trying to build and attack. And when you fail at that, or if you fail attempting to do that, you learn a lot more than if you cower behind your defenses and don't really learn of what's going out on the map. When should you get forges? In most matchups. Usually a good time to get your forges, I would say at least one before 6 minutes. It is something to get after your tech. We were 5 off. So close yet. The people? Well, 4 off. I was within 5. Yeah. Generally, no matter what you're building, though it does matter. No matter what you're building, if you max out within 12 minutes, you are in very good shape. A lot of people focus on StarCraft is not really a strategy game. I know, right?
Subscriber detected.
And just
Holy Canuck is chillin' for 1 month.
in general, like, it's not really a strategy game. It's a little closer to, I would compare it to Factorio.
Winter Gaming is now chilling.
I would compare it to Factorio. No, not me. Who? Holy Canuck. Congratulations. Because the closest, the thing you should be doing the most at the lower levels, if you're trying to improve and like get better at all parts of the game, it's perfectly, you're not going to learn to do it here, but it's perfectly fine to do your cheeses and your cannon rushes and make other people hate you. Like, if that's what you want to do, I mean, you could always go back to League of Legends, but there is that option too. But at the end of the day,
I'm sure.
it is, well, there you go. I think we got within the 50 there. Or did we? No. Because I pressed 2 buttons in the 1 second the game lasted. And so, I say Factorial because it's a little complicated to understand how to efficiently set up your economy early. How to get resources. How to defend against early attacks. What tech to choose. And it's mostly a single-player experience. I know in Factorio it's all a single-player experience, but bear with me here. Like, because I think there's a big overlap of the people watching this right now and people who know what Factorio is. So, if you come into it a little more with that mindset, I think it is better than thinking you're playing like some sort of intense boxing or chess match against someone who's also trying to figure out how to mine minerals efficiently. Like, now SC2 does make that aspect a little more. So this is, by the way, why I recommend. I mean, you might be taking my advice. Why I recommend players.
I'm sure this. I've never seen this screen before.
You'll find some of this at the lower levels. And you're going to get a little bit higher MMR because of it. It's gonna happen, one way or another. But once again, it's not about. You know what? I'm gonna take a little time before queuing up. I think I have a productive way to spend a little break here. Not a Q&A break, but let's bring up the SC2 Replay Stats Training Center.
Oh, good.
I'm just
Now
gonna.
I have your attention.
Blue _
I'm just gonna
Mars
go
chilling for 1
with
month.
Terran to start because we had a lot more games as Terran so far. But if my goal the SC2 replay stats training set. That reminds me, we have some SC2 replay stats elite codes we're going to start giving away. But all you have to do to access the training centers have an SC2 replay stats account. You can use the app to all you have to do is direct it to the documents folder where your replays are saved. Automatically done. If you can figure that out, then they'll be automatically uploaded. For free, you can do 2 training centers a day. If you have SC2 Replay Stats Elite, which is $5 a month and goes to running the site. The site is self-sufficient, which is really cool, but that's what it goes to. You can do as many as you want. But let's be honest here. Are you averaging more than 2 games a day? So, but for absolutely free. It will compare your statistics with those of whatever league you're trying to get to. Here, you can change your target, but my target is gold. I'm in silver. That's Terran. My target is gold. Let's compare. Total suggestions on this game. 6 suggestions. Let's take a look. Make sure you're not building out of your production facilities. Spend your resources. Don't get supply blocked. Idle workers. These are mistakes I make a lot of the time, to be honest. And then in the mid game. So these are the very basics, but if you want something to focus on, here you go. I mean, you're like, isn't that everything? Well, it wasn't a great game for me. But compared to your average silver leaguer even, and there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of games it compares to. Last year, 3 million games between bronze and diamond were uploaded to SC2 Replay Stats. So, not a small amount of data points there. I had, on average, a lower collection rate. I had higher unspent minerals, so it's not coming from nowhere. It is comparing me to your average silver leaguer and saying you're coming up short. Now, some of these could be interpreted a little differently. Like, for example, I produced... Where are my gold stars? All right, it's 2022. I want to know what I did good. I don't want to know what I did bad. I had 15 workers produced in the first 4 minutes. The average silver leaguer, significantly less. Okay? Gold star. Wow. Mid-game. So, you can read between the lines on this. Everything that's not in red, you did better. 33 versus 10 in those 4 minutes. So, as you can see, the focus on that, and obviously building 3 times as many workers means your income will be significantly higher, which may lead to having more unspent resources. But I would say that is a better problem to have than not having enough resources. It's still a problem, but it's a better problem. So you can check these things out on SC2 Replay Stats. Pick whatever game. And if you upload your games to your profile, you can see your general trends of, like, what are the things that I, on average, do throughout all my games. Not this one specifically, right? Like so. I'm a slow, arthritic gamer who mains toss. Sky toss just works a lot better for me, since I play around 40 APM and gold. How far can I go playing fast, expand into aggressive 2 Stargate? Pretty far. Pretty far.
One way or another, you got this.
I do think, much like Mech for Terran, just straight up Sky Toss is a valid option. Opening up strong.
Now that's the wait.
Well, we did manage to gather 180 MMRs for that one. But we do land in bronze, so. I know you're a master. No, this is... it is an issue in the lower leagues. I will, like, straight up. There are some players, maybe he's starting his low APM challenge. Or maybe that's just his normal state. It wasn't much better back in the day. Why? Not so much this sort of issue. The issue was we couldn't even see our MMR. You could win or lose games, and your ladder points would change. But your ladder points aren't exactly your MMR. And your rank doesn't necessarily translate to your ability to get promoted. So, at the end of the day, there was just this limbo, especially as the season was ending.
Welcome back. It actually worked this time.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this is a split of people who are enjoying the stream and how much are instead your average ladder denizens. Though it is, if their intent is to disrupt what we're doing here today, they're starting to succeed. I'll give them that. We made it. Still gathering a lot of MMR as well. It hasn't yet been confident in my placement. You have macro in your name, instant forfeit. Yeah. At some point, we'll even out. You know what? We'll give it some time here. There are a lot. I think you just power through. It's a little more awkward if you're streaming, right? But there's still plenty of time to answer questions. I do think everybody here, everyone watching this, everyone listening to it in the background, wondering
Remember, don't
what's happening.
Okay, maybe a little.
I think they can get to platinum. I think that's no matter what sort of inflation or cheeses, I think platinum is the level that anyone who puts a little bit of time in is capable of achieving. Like, as I've said before, I don't know if he's here, but I knew a player with literally no hands, didn't have arms because of childhood disease, I believe. But the details don't matter. Point is, he didn't have hands, and he was a platinum Terran. So, he found ways. So if he could do it, I mean, he wasn't a dumb player. He was a very smart player, but like, and didn't have very high APM. But the point is, I'm not using that as a metric. I'm not trying to compare people to people without hands. Let's be clear here. I'm just saying that solid mechanics and a productive mindset will get you to platinum. It won't necessarily be the easiest road. You'll definitely hit pockets of cheese. You'll hit just... And definitely some things that will throw you off. Maybe you're just not very good at following the build in a timely manner. That, I think, is a big thing. A lot of players will get pretty easily distracted. Right? So, like right now. I built my gateway. I built the cyber core. I'm just building the pylon at the front because we're doing essentially the same build every time.
You have engaged the enemy.
That's what we're trying to do. Just keep it to basics. Since he's expanded, I'm not worrying too much about getting a Walloff. I don't need one. I'm gonna, instead, I built the cyber core back. I should have had 3 out of 3 in gas. So now we're gonna have to do some actual micro. I'm gonna pull the probes and chrono boost an adept. So remember, remind me to go back to the replay after this. And we'll see how many minerals he has during this whole experience. is my... Oh, my Robo's done. That Reaper distracted me. Get 2 more gateways.
Your base is under attack.
Do a little stutter step. And there you go. The key, and even I let myself get a little distracted. It's hard not to. The more you play, the easier it gets. But just because there's a unit in your base doesn't mean everything stops right there. It's very likely he stopped everything he was doing right there. And even if I lose a few probes, if he didn't build 2 or 3 SCVs, and we just saw in the training center, it's very likely he didn't. I'm going to send the Adept Shade in, because I happen to have this coming across. Alright, he's got a starport. We're going to let the Adept go in, but I'm treating it like an observer. I'm building probes here. He's got engineering base. He's got a little bit of everything. What does this mean? Alright. I'm ignoring that Adept.
On purpose?
I'm going to research Warp Gate, because that actually is a massive mistake by me.
Cheers,
So now I gotta build
Thanks for
out
the
of
content.
gateways all these units. So let's get that started. Not building Warp Gate was a big deal. So, but here's the plan. I'm gonna get back to 6 gateways on 2 base. Why? Because he's got some barracks. 6 gateways, robotics bay, and a robo. Need more pylons. A little slow on this. Pylons around the edge of the base. Yes, I know I feel a little bit like a Bronze League hero. But, alright. He's moving out. Let's chrono boost that Warp Gate research.
Well,
So you can go above 16 probes on a base. You can actually go to 24. It really should be in the yellow until 24. Because 24 is the max number before it becomes more efficient to long-distance mine. I know, it turns red. It's very scary. But the actual number that it should turn red at is 24. It's because when you go between 19 and 24, you get decreasing amounts of value. We're gonna shield battery overcharge. That's why we have that battery in front. My forge is a bit late. Did I not start a Colossus? I just built Stalkers! Ah, I am my own worst enemy. Let's get this gas going. Let's do the gas trick. Oh, I have all these probes. I don't know. Widowmine drop came in, or I just screwed up the gas. Right click, shift, 1, 2. Right click, 1, 2, 3. Right click. And there you go. Ooh, a Banshee. I'm going to control click the Stalkers and put them on control 3 here.
a mineral field.
And I have to cancel the Colossus and build instead an Observer, because he might have Cloak. Let's get those cannons in a nice spot, but I've got 1,000 minerals. Let's pay attention to that. And we're going to build another Nexus. So this is exactly the scenario where I can feel overwhelming. Like, oh my god, he's attacking me. He's got everything. The more he focuses on me, the less he's focusing on himself. That first attack, not very scary. A second attack, especially since he built the Banshee,
Nice.
not going to be very scary either. Because that Banshee comes out of the starport. I know, I'm blowing minds right now. But if he's building a Banshee, and this is true, it's not Medevacs or Vikings. Banshee made the full tour here. Just gonna right click on it. Ooh, the cloak. Let him micro his heart out. Chrono Boost a Colossus. Chrono Boost the Forge. Let's get 2 Forges. Let's not be stingy here. Set the camera location on the 3rd. So now I'm gonna get some spotter pylons, because the 3rd base means I'm a little more stretched out here, right? Observers are all well and good, but they take up time on your rope. Oh. Hello. Guardian Shield. Let's warp in some more Stalkers. Control Shift 1. Like I said, you have more bases to defend, more vulnerable points. So I'm gonna get some pylons. Just out on the map. Pylons are pretty cheap. And, I mean, they give you supply. Honestly, I do this in my high-level games as well. Maybe not exactly like this, but the idea's there. I very much like having spotter pylons, because they could turn into warping and zealot pylons as well, right? Like, they're not... Pylons have several uses. Not a lot, right? Several, though. Alright, so there's a mineral wall there. As you can tell, he's very intent on attacking me, so... You can also just box and shift 1.
They're attacking your base. Give them some trouble.
As well, if you'd like. Get these gases. We're at 78 probes. Time for a 4th. Let's go get this one. One thing I did notice, I like to have... this is personal preference. Drag scroll. I put it on the side mouse button. I just got used to that for observing, for casting. I tried to make it a control group to use with units, but I've used it for casting for too long. He's attacking into the main, because you let a Terran go, they're going to get antsy. Especially a Terran who fancies themselves a micro player. So, he couldn't help himself. He decided he needed to attack. Let's get a gateway over here. Zaslav's doing this. Let's get some gateways out there.
Your warriors are under attack.
Get a cannon or 2. And now it's that time. It's time. Need some more gates. I should have already gotten more gates around 50 probes. Honestly, as you can see here, it's kind of more... I make fun of Protoss for having more of a build order stew than a build order. Where you just kind of throw everything in and it ends up being a mix with varying parts of things. But it works. It works. Because of Warp Gate and the way it works, like, you kind of just add new ingredients over time. It's not like Terran, where you have to scale up your production and you need specific things. So the strength and weakness of Protoss, it's very easy to kind of miss parts, like just miss ingredients. Because you don't always need all of them. Like, you're not always... Unlike Terran, where it's like, I got my Marines and my Marauders and my Medevacs, and that's it. No, you can maybe go without Stalkers. You can maybe go without Observers. Some games. Like, sometimes you don't always need Colossi. A lot of tanks there. We're going to do that quick warping of Zealots. Shift 1. I don't have charge. I just started charge.
Mineral patch is gone, and it's not coming back.
So yeah, the rapid fire hotkey. Honestly, I think rapid fire Zealots, if you can get used to it. Yeah, he dropped. I just left the Stalkers in the main. This is the benefit of not being tied to the Selecto Army hotkey. That's another thing. The Selecto Army hotkey, much of the time, causes you to need more APM. The amount of times I've seen players, instead of just using control groups, try to avoid screwing up their multitasking because they're addicted to the Selecto Army hotkey. It's a really rough habit. Like, I'm not saying the Selecto Army hotkey is useless. Not at all. But if you ever want to do a Zealot counterattack, if you ever want to have a Warp Prism on the map or something, and you have no idea how to do anything but the so. Like, I'd rather have these zealots. I'm warping in here. I'd rather have them on no control group. But at least I know, because I've been diligent about putting this on control group 1, that they're not going to get screwed up if I ever need to micro my main army. I see so much Protoss players who will just stare at these zealots because they know they can't do anything else, because they'll use the select army hotkey and it'll screw it all up. So instead, while those zealots are attacking, we're going to move out, knowing
field depleted.
that he's probably out here somewhere. Oh, he's in the main.
A mineral field has been
What a
depleted.
crazy dude. We're going
They're
to warp
attacking
in.
your base.
Some
Army
more
is
of those.
attacked. Select all and pass.
So here's another awkward difference, is that Colossi could walk up cliffs. So that has interesting implications.
You engage the enemy. Upgrade complete.
We're gonna fight Guardian Shield, but I'm gonna add a
Army under
Cyber
attack.
Core,
They're not immortals.
Gates.
Well,
So the intent, what will happen a lot of the time, and that's how I think you'll win against many of these more dedicated, aggressive players. He's staring at the other side of the map. I think there's a lot to learn, because a lot of Protoss get tied up worrying about things they don't need to worry about, right? So let's just watch the last minute of the turn. I mean, he had a pretty solid opener. Honestly, he got 3 bases. Maybe he watched the low APM challenge. Don't attack so much, though, my friend. But
Base is under attack.
not scouting for where the army is. Now, honestly, bit of a mistake for me. I didn't know where his army was, but
Are under attack.
if you don't need to send your whole army across the map, 5 zealots will do the trick.
Corky Pine is chilling for 4
Is under
months.
attack. Your forces.
Let's go to the Reaper Micro. I was a little surprised to see a Reaper. I was late. I didn't get Warp Gate. I was late on the Adept.
Complete.
The Probe Micro was almost non-existent, but
Add-on complete. Your forces are under attack.
I'm gonna give a little tiny bit of credit. Alright, a little tiny bit of credit. He focused on his build behind it.
Your forces are under
Now, his
attack.
build was not ideal. I'm impressed. I'm impressed. He looked away from the Reaper to do his build. Not bad. Of course, going for Stim for 3 Marines. So, let's not worry about the Terran. Though, I obviously made some huge mistakes. If I looked at my build on Angry Coach, I'd be like, Warp Gate? Warp Gate? Warp Gate? Warp Gate? Mostly because that Reaper caused me such a panic. But most of what we're doing here is showing that it doesn't matter how bad of a start. It's very easy to get back on track, and if you focus, you'll probably be able to do it quicker than your opponent. Because if you have a decent plan, that puts you almost 100% further along than most of your opponents. So, let's see. Did we succeed, though? I think I might have overdone it. Maybe skyrocketing a little high in the MMRs here. Oh, yeah, there you go. I think I'm actually gonna do what I recommend for others. Well, actually, that wouldn't have any effect. I think we're gonna be getting through the Silver League pretty quick here, but we did go 5 APM over. Silver is 60. Oh, I forgot. Silver is 60. We didn't spend much time in bronze. I may feel obligated to do a bit of an addendum, because I did not expect to be gaining 150. And this is what I'm talking about. I haven't actually played those 25 placement matches. So right now, as you can see, my opponent also, the system not incredibly confident in where he should be because he's got an entire gold league of MMR range. Thing is, when you leave league, it doesn't lower your MMR. Only losing games does. So, and I do agree that most of the ideas we're doing, I saw a few comments. Like, most of the things we're doing don't need to be done in bronze. They work just as well and are just as relevant in gold. So spending extra time in bronze is not particularly necessary. Because it's not like a bronze leaguer unless it's someone who's never played StarCraft before. In which case, I recommend either you play the campaign, play some games against the AI, but otherwise jumping in is fine. Because remember, those 25 games, and then you'll be right, well, probably near the bottom of the ladder, figuring it out. So. Yeah, remember, obviously, we're doing average APM. Whenever you do rapid fire, it will shoot up. That's like when Reynor gets to 1600 APM, that's because he just held down the Zergling key for like 112 Zerglings. Stuff like that. So. There will be spikes. Because that's just, because this, all this does is measure instantaneous. It's essentially, if the last 3 seconds were, or however much time, were spread over an entire minute, how much APM would that be? But that is just not how minutes work, usually. So, all right, let's really focus on the build this time. Pylon, 14. Probius, 2 hotkey. 1 more probe. I'm actually going to get 2 more probes. And then, as the this finishes, I'm going to get a gateway. And then this probe, after building the gate, will scout. I actually switch it to the 3 key. I'm going to chrono boost, and this is out of reflex, but you can rally the probe to the gas. 17 assimilator. This is my builder probe now. This probe builds things. I think it's fine. It's more important to make sure everything is built in a timely manner than worry about having a few extra minerals. I actually saw a comment. Is it important to return your minerals or your gas before going to build or before switching to gas or something? No. Think about it. You're maybe losing, what, 5 minerals? Or 4 gas? It doesn't matter. Even 1 second is not worth your time. You mine that much. Oh. Alright. He's moving around here. I'm going to look around. And he's got 2 gas, and he's trapped me in his base. What a dick.
Army under attack. Select all and panic.
I'm going to mineral lock there, which units do not have collision. That's a mineral lock. But we saw the barracks. He wants the probe. Oh, no. It's better the probe dies and we move on with our lives than to worry about microing it. Get that robotics. Nope. Warp gate. Second gas. Should have been after the pilot. I got distracted by my probe. This game is hard. Alright. And a shield battery. This first adept, I'm going to walk across. We'll do 1 shape. All I'm looking for is did he expand on the low ground. That's it. Robo's halfway done. Let's add those gateways. I'm rallying to the natural. Robotics facility, control 5. Build an observer. Here's all I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do 1 adept shade. Well, looks like it got stuck on the wall. Cancel it, and now that adept stays there. I don't care what else he's doing on the map now. I'm worrying about myself now. Let's get 3 in gas. I'm gonna start the Triforce pylons. I'm gonna get a second observer. This first observer, gonna go across the map. The second one is in case I need an observer at home.
Research finished, but I'm still waiting on high-sec auto-tracking.
As warp gate finishes, we're getting tier 2 of tech, the robotics bay. And I'm warping in with stalkers. We're at 40 probes. I'm going to get the gases at the second base. With a lot of builds at a higher level, you'd probably get them earlier, but we're focusing very much on just getting enough probes mining minerals. All right. Observer, probes, observer, probes, observer, probes. When you think observer, think probes. Shift E, and then it will be in surveillance mode. We're at 40 probes. Time for more gas. Robotics bay is finishing.
Your warriors are under attack.
Which means we can start a Colossus. Make sure we have the pylon Triforce here at the natural. Warp in stalkers. 6 probes, right click, shift, 1, 2, 3, and then convenient, 3 left over. So now, forge, as we go up to 50, 1, 2, 3 more gates. So we're going to have 6 gateways, a robotics facility, and we're aiming at 50 probes. Starting extended thermal lance, I'm going to put the forge on the nexus key. I'm going to now put a shield battery in the main. This is in case of drops later. Warp in a couple sentries for those guardian shields later on. This is my builder probe now. I'm going to go to the third. Would it be worth it to transfer probes from the main to the natural so both are half saturated? It's not worth it to do that. It is not worth it to have like 8 on each. If you have over 20, that's when you should transfer. If you have under 20, your time is better spent elsewhere. Now, if your base is mining, if you have essentially more than 50% more than it says, because the further away patches have half as many minerals. So you go down to 4 mineral patches, which is 8 efficient probes, pretty quick. And then the other 4 take twice as long to mine. They have 900 versus 1800 minerals. The idea is to encourage you to expand, but kind of ease you into having a lower economy while you're doing so. So you get rewarded pretty early on for expanding to things like a third base, but it is not imperative you do it immediately. Gonna get the Triforce here. I'm gonna get a spotter pylon.
Research is done.
Over there.
Your forces are just a little bit better.
Extended thermal lance is done. More pylon.
Mineral patch
I'm gonna
is
get
gone.
10
It's
gates.
not coming back.
Usually around 60 probes, you can get up to 10 gates. Let's be honest here, I'm probably not gonna be on top of warping in every time. If you are, you probably don't need as many gates, but I'm even going to use spotter pylons right in the front. Why not? I mean, you'll get the attack. That's another benefit over observers, is while they'll probably die, you'll get a notification saying, hey, there's units here. As opposed to maybe missing it on the minimap. Though, I did like, and I'm going to repeat this now, someone else's idea of what to do to train minimap awareness. And it is, in your games against the AI, like when you do a warm-up game or two, to patrol a worker on the outlying bases of the map. Like, honestly, like right here. Just patrol back and forth. So, not necessarily because you'll see anything, but you'll be used to looking at the map because you'll see something on it. Like, just something to draw your eye more often. I think that's a pretty good tip. We're going to get a Twilight Council and another Forge. I'm going to shift-click these in. Get all the gases. 70 probes. Chrono boost. Why not get a couple more robotics? There's nothing... So, one of my biggest pet peeves are people's misconception that building a bunch of forges or robos, like, that's a mistake. Think about it. You can build, for the cost of one Colossus, 2 robotics facilities. If you think you might be a little slow on building your Colossi, a second robo is a better investment overall. Because it's not like you're hurting for money anyways. So, 3 robos? Fine. 20 gates? Whatever. The idea is to have too much money, not too little. Charge. +2 attack. I'm going to put those on that Nexus key. 3 more Colossi. Warp in some Stalkers. And for now, I am going to use that Select All Army hotkey. Let me see here. SCV is going about their business. I'm going to take... Remember, I'm using those camera locations. I like to use the drag scroll, center the base, or you can just double tap Control F5. And now, there you go. Main, natural, third, fourth.
A mineral field has been depleted. Mind out of that cluster.
He's added
Still in the game? Nice.
several sensor towers. As we see here. But I am now maxed out. So
Cluster, you thief.
I am going to get another Nexus with its Triforce. I'm going to start any upgrades I can. I'm going to get Templar Archives for Archons.
Research all done. You're all mined out of that mineral field.
He's got some tanks here, which actually I gotta be careful, as tanks are dangerous. These Colossi are being pretty dumb here, to be honest. Right up until the Marines decide to walk in. So, tanks, Immortals, and Zealots. This is where the Immortal charge. Stalker Blink is not allowed. Honestly, at 5k MMR, I don't trust myself to use Blink in a way that's productive. I mean, it still has certain uses, but I do not recommend Blink except as a later game upgrade, because then you'll be encouraged to use Blink Stalkers, which is not usually a efficient choice. The reason we're using Stalker Colossus is it's the very simplest unit composition that covers everything you need to start. But as we move up, we're going to focus more on Charge Lot, the CIA build, which is Charge Lot Immortal Archon, which is a lot more reliable for taking on players who will build a more significant army and beating them efficiently. But here, Stalker Colossus kind of gets your foot in the door to start out. So we are in silver. The limit is 60, though I do feel we could have cut down on that a bit. Where did the Terran go wrong? Well, we have a whole series for Terran this time around. But the general summary is that his build was, he didn't focus on maxing out. And he only built Marine Tank, as I've gone over in the low APM Challenge Terran. In case you didn't notice, I am subtly, not so subtly now that I'm saying it out loud, but I am preparing all the races to fight each other as well. Like, for Terran, I recommend Marine, Tank, Medevac, but also adding Vikings after 6 Medevacs. So that way you're prepared for Colossi. For Protoss, I'm recommending Stalker Colossus, which is strong until you run into Vikings. So at that point, we're going to go over Charge Lots, Immortals, and Archons. But for Terran, just to hold that back a bit, for Terran, once we get to the Gold League, which is when for Protoss we're going to go over Charge Lot, Immortal, Archon. Well, don't worry, I got you, Terrans. We're going to be going over Liberators, Ghosts, stuff like that. So we're adding in this next, a little more complicated, but necessary types of armies. Like, what about Zerg players? Well, Zerg early game and mid game is a little simpler. But the real struggle for Zerg players, which we have yet to find besides the Stream Sniper, is less what units and how to control them and more understanding what mechanics are important. Because Zerg is just fundamentally different, both in playing and fighting against. So,
Nozzle is chilling for 3
less
months.
focus will be
Take
on
this free
exactly what units to build and more on understanding how the Zerg-specific mechanics work. Though we still will be going for very likely Roach, Hydra, and then throwing in some Lurkers. But that is another day. Couple more games, and then we'll have a question break. And then we'll probably jump into a few more after that. We're already 2 hours in. I know I spent a little time building up to it. But once again, you're not expected. I think a lot of players starting out trying to emulate it are going to have higher APM than me. And that does make some sense, because if you're spending... Because I know what buttons to press, so that is kind of what we're showing here. Once you get some more practice and play some more games, it becomes easier to reliably press the right buttons in the right order.
Remember, don't panic. Okay,
All right.
maybe a little panic.
Advanced, as we're getting up silver, advanced tactics. We're gonna, since it's a random player, we're playing again. Hugh Jorgen. It's a random player. So, we're gonna assume he's Zerg. We have to make some assumptions. Walling off, think about this. 3 plus 1. 3 plus 1. What do I mean? 3 plus 1 is how you wall off on most maps. They all have a standardized size to the natural, and this is for what we're about to show. It is a size that 3 Protoss buildings and then a slot. Did I screw it up? You see? 3 plus 1. A gateway, a cyber core, and then another gate. Usually you put the gap in between the gate and the cyber core, which makes it easier to put something on hold position. But that is what we're doing. If you run higher APM, the matchmaking skews you to a higher league. It does not. All matchmaking takes into account is, did you win or did you lose? Doesn't matter if the game was 0 seconds or an hour and a half. Did you win or did you lose? If you run a consistent higher APM, does the system realize you're a better player than what your rank says? So this is the low APM challenge. My opponent last game had 130 APM in the Silver League. So I'm just going to leave that out there. And while we're trying to be educational and helpful, I'm going to go ahead and just let that one simmer for a bit. We got some important information from that probe. Alright. He's got 2 gases, and he's got a spawning pool, which is scary. So, because I kind of screwed up the wall, that means the cyber core is a little bit exposed here. But, and I was too busy being sarcastic at Twitch chat, and now I'm supply blocked. So this will happen. You'll spend time scouting. You'll be like, Winter just said something funny to Twitch chat. And then you'll forget your build. It happens, right? I'm gonna start a shield battery. So this is not a perfect wall. This is, honestly, I should have demonstrated against the AI. If I remember, I will do so. It takes a lot of practice. I still screw it up, even in high-level games, about 10% of the time, which is 10% too high. You would think by like the 50th time I've played on a map, I wouldn't do it anymore. But yet here we are. Robotics facility. I'm sending out another probe. So this wall isn't ideal because the cyber core is very exposed. My pylon is too close, so I can't easily build more, say, shield batteries or a gateway behind the wall, which is the most stable thing. Because maybe if it's a big all-in, I want to just hard wall off. So ideally, you have enough space between the pylon and the front with which to build essentially a secondary wall. I know it's a lot of steps, but that is the most reliable way to defend against the inevitable Zergling rushes, which I say inevitable because
Research complete, but have we learned anything?
it is essentially how your average Platinum Zerg comes to exist. I joke, but it's from a place of truth that the reason why so many Zergs hit a wall in Platinum is because until that level, Terran and Protoss don't know how to build one. And if you are a Protoss or a Terran player against Zerg, which is kind of rare in Bronze and Silver statistically, but increases as time goes up to being about even. That will significant, like, you spending 30 minutes figuring out how to wall off correctly will save you hours of losses against Zerg. Hours. If you add them all up. There are weeks of my life could have been spent in victory as opposed to defeat if I had a little more patience. That's just a life lesson, not necessarily a StarCraft lesson. Honestly, life lessons in StarCraft are a bit of a double-edged sword. Part of the Swarm kids will know what I'm talking about. Alright. Observer, probes. Observer, probes. Is that a hive? Wow, what a crazy guy. So I think there's not a small chance this crazy dude is gonna go lurkers. Because you can tell it's a hive by the way it is. It's the big one. He's building hive tech. So we're gonna build Stalker Colossus. The summary is, if he's building a hive now, he's not attacking me for a while. Especially on 2 bases. So, why would I change? Even if it is lurkers, or ultralisks, or, honestly, well, if it ends up being lurkers or ultras, we'll start building more immortals. And we'll build less stalkers and colossi. But I'm getting that 3rd base. Gonna get a cannon, shield battery, Triforce pylon. Make sure I warp in an adept at the wall. I'm gonna get another observer. Actually, we'll put this one on the hotkey as well. A Twilight Council as well, as +1's about halfway done. Get a couple more robotics facilities. I'm gonna send this observer out because he killed the first one. It's good to have at least one thing out there, right?
New subscriber detected.
Oh, you cats.
C4 Cats is chilling for 17 months. I heard if I don't use my Prime Sub, I'm basically losing money. For you. So here I am. Less
Thank
than
you
3.
for being efficient. And that's what we're all about here. We're gonna get charge. Get that 2nd forge.
Your research is complete. Upgrades finished up.
Observer, probes.
Oh, a
Mine out of that
follower.
cluster. And
We're
still
gonna
in the
put this
game.
up here. You can
Nice.
still see
The
those
Eternal
rams.
Void is chilling for 1
The
month.
Eternal Void. Thank you. Let's get some of this gas. Getting another base. We're at 70 probes. Perfectly fine. And I'm supply block, so. Chrono boost. Add to the Nexus key. Chrono. You got more pylons coming up.
You're all mined out of that mineral field.
Cannon, shield battery, another cannon, spotter pylons. Got plenty of probes here.
Research
Oh, I didn't
all
set
done.
a camera location for this base. Let's do so. Oh, this one. Oh, so I don't think I explained this. To warp in like that, it's not rapid fire. I only have rapid fire for my zealots right now. But if you hold shift while warping in, you don't have to actually... So otherwise you have to S, click, click, click. But if you hold shift, you can just keep tapping, just keep clicking stalkers out, essentially. So even if you're not using rapid fire, holding shift allows you to smoothly queue that up. Control, shift 1.
You engage the enemy? On purpose?
Alright. Nearly maxed. Chrono boost. Chrono boost. Start a Templar Archives.
Your upgraded mineral patch is gone, and it's not coming back.
Upgrades. And I'm gonna start a Stargate. Because in case he goes, like, if he has an army I can't beat, that's what we're gonna be using. I mean, it's not the first choice, but before you move out, really a Stargate existing is potentially important. So, looks like he has an army over here. We're gonna get
They're not immortals.
another upgrade. We can use the shield battery overcharge. Hydras, obviously not ideal against Colossi. Shift 1, and we can head across. Set up another base. Move some probes over. So we're going to do that surveillance mode observer there before attacking. Guardian shield.
Army under attack. Select all and panic. I've never seen this screen before.
And there you go. Seen a lot of Hydras tonight. And I see, that was a lot. I was pretty close to doing the build. Ah, we still got there. Under 60. Honestly, he did a lot with 72 APM. Obviously, Hydras are not an incredible counter to Colossi. But he did quite well for what he had. All right. So, it's time for a quick Q&A. We're going to take rapid fire, some Protoss questions. General questions about all three races we'll take at the end of each. And then if there are any questions that are more in-depth, I will, well, in further episodes, we'll get them from YouTube as well. Especially the race-specific questions. But for now, going to take a bit of a breather and talk about whatever questions Switch Chat can come up with that I deem to be productive. And then we'll play 5 more games, and we'll wrap up Protoss Challenge number 1, probably around Silver 1. So, PvP used to start with 2 Adepts. Why is that no longer the case? So here in the Bronze and Silver Leagues, we're starting out focused on getting a gate expansion build. That is going to be 14 pylon at the front of the base. Near the ramp, a gateway on 16. Chrono boosting a probe after that. And then an assimilator on 17. You scout with the probe that built the gate, usually around about the 1 minute mark, and you see what's happening on the other side. If they have a forge, probably getting cannon rushed. If they have a bunch of gateways, you might have to take that into account. But here, in the deep meta leagues, worrying about what your opponent is doing is not as relevant as having a stable foundation to your build. Because even if you lose a few workers early on, statistically, I mean, let's throw that last game into the training center here real quick. Just food for thought. Into the training center with that last match. And we'll see. What is your average Protoss? Your average Protoss, and this is between all Protoss at Silver or Gold League. In the first 4 minutes, build about 14 workers, and they start with 12, so... And then after that, they build about 13 more. So even if Adepts or Oracles or Void Rays kill half a dozen, even 10 probes, if you're building 30 workers, statistically, even a Gold League opponent, who's also Protoss, this is comparing to Gold League Protoss, will still have less workers than you. And that is probably because they're spending so much time on that. Yes, it is dangerous. 2 Adepts are dangerous, Oracles are dangerous. But the point is, more shit counters less shit. And at the end of the day, having a build you can remember is more important than specifically what that build is. Is Toss easier for new players compared to Terran? Honestly, I think Terran is the easiest for new players, and not just because that's where you start with the campaign. Not just because it is, just the campaign mostly. It's because it is the closest to basic RTS. Like your generic, build a barracks, build marines, it takes this long to build them. Like, it is the most similar. If someone's never played an RTS game, I still think the concepts are most simple. And as we've seen, it doesn't really matter the units as long as you have a game plan. So, Protoss is relatively simple, but it has some quirks to it that definitely newer players don't really understand, like pylons and how they work. Warp Gate in general is another one, and the fact that the Nexus is kind of a big utility item, but there's definitely some unique mechanics that take time, or people just ignore them, and that's fine too, but it does take a little bit more knowledge to learn Protoss. Could you go over how to properly wall? Yes, that's actually a good point. I will show you now. On most maps, the only exception is 2,000 atmospheres, which is slightly smaller. I hopefully redeem myself. I'm doing instant build and research, by the way. So, I'll actually show you how to practice over and over. I don't know if someone's made a map specifically for this, but I can show you. What is more versatile? The Stargate is probably the most versatile opener, but the Robo is the simplest, and the most stable. So, unlimited money, I think. I don't actually know what unlimited money means, but anyways. So, let's build it right. I'm insta-building. Just getting enough. You can do this on either side. Most maps will have an indicator. The maps that don't have an indicator are annoying, but that's where your Nexus is going to go. So, you don't want to be too far ahead of it. Remember, your building only has to be like halfway in the power field. It does not have to fully cover or even mostly cover the building. So, when I build right there, that leaves me enough space for a gate, another gate, a cyber core, and then a zealot. You can kind of vary this a little. The cyber core could be on a different side. Usually you want the gap in the wall. And part of the reason you have this space is so, say there's a bunch of roaches coming in. Or you can build things like shield batteries behind it, just leaving enough space so that way, 1, the pylon isn't vulnerable, and 2, honestly, not a perfect wall for me. But let's give it another shot. Isn't that Cybercore bad because it's exposed? It can be exposed. The reason it was such an issue in the game I was playing was because it was literally hanging out there. Not, like, being out in front is okay, but being the only thing out in front, not ideal. Why you no let me take over?
4. Wow.
Oh. All right. One more second. This is important. I think this is helpful to teach. But we got to add an AI. The AI is irrelevant, but the AI needs to be in the game for this. We're not fighting it. It's just got to be in the game so it counts as the game still playing. Do not skip Warp Gate. Never skip Warp Gate. There's no scenario to skip Warp Gate. In fact,
Here we go again.
there was a patch not too long ago, like several years after Legacy of the Void came out, making it so your gateways automatically become Warp Gates when Warp Gate finishes. It's because Warp Gate is just a straight up upgrade. The amount of time it takes to build units out of gateways is longer than the cooldown to warp them in at super pylons. So not only do they have to build out of the gate, and you can chrono boost in the same way. So
Donation confirmed.
thank
Dragon
you.
Fruities just donated $4.20. Not a question, but the title to Clem vs Max Pack's title from 2 months ago makes me laugh every time.
I think I have like 6 games of Fun versus Max Packs, but thank you. So, there you go. That's the ideal. Now, the big vulnerability here is that the pylon is more exposed, but with this, you can easily add another pylon that'll power it. You can add the gate behind, stuff like that. Honestly, probably shouldn't even be instant build and train, but this is what I was trying to show you. Is you can take command, select yourself, and the only thing that'll screw up is SC2 replay stats. Just take it from here. You don't have to reload the game. You can just take command of yourself from replay, essentially creating a new instance of the game, and you can practice again. You screw up the pylon, only takes a few seconds. All right, let's say this is the wrong spot. Oh.
Just another replay to send in.
So you don't have to go through the trouble of making another game. You don't even have to go through the trouble of canceling things. But instead... And one more time. I usually like to lead on the outside. Like, I put the gate on the outside, like the furthest away first. So that's the one most likely to be closest to Zerglings. Furthest away from my base is most vulnerable. And the Cyber Core. And I still need to mine the minerals, but... Gravity gas. Zealot, same size. And test. Let me in! And then you realize mineral walk's a thing, but Zerglings can't mineral walk, which is very good. So, there you go.
Don't worry.
Back to the questions for a moment. Yes, the only downside of Warp Gate is that you cannot queue up units, which goes back to why I think Terran is a little simpler to start out, because it is closer to your basic RTS. Warp Gate does kind of require you... That's why I recommend building 10 to 12 gates with 70 probes, as opposed to just 6 or 8 like you'll see pro players build. Because let's be a little honest with ourselves on how quickly we're warping in units, right? I usually build 10 to 12 myself. Even though it's technically inefficient, I'm missing 5-10 seconds here or there almost every time. What is more important, Warp Gate or First Tech? Warp Gate. For you, Warp Gate. There are occasional Stargate builds that involve delaying Warp Gate slightly. We are several thousand MMR away from that mattering. What do you do against Lurkers? Immortal, Archon, Charizlot is how we're going to deal with that. And then judicious use of a Warp Prism. But The final transition, if lurkers are just too early or there's no way to deal with them, that's where the carriers come in. Disruptors are not a reliable counter to, well, anything, but lurkers especially. Why did you go for Colossi? Because that's what we're doing. Just to reiterate, instead of worrying about countering my opponent here in bronze and silver, we're worrying about ourselves. We're playing Factorial. This is my build. Stalkers and Colossi are the simplest units that get the point across. If you can max out on Stalker Colossus, which is just 2 units plus a sentry or 2, about the lowest APM composition, then you'll be ready to do some CIA builds. Charge Lot, Archon, Immortal. The weaker part of Charge Lot, Archon, or Charge Lot, Immortal, Archon, is that you're a little more vulnerable to early attacks because you don't have splash damage as much. But it is much easier to use in the later game. So the idea is we're understanding how to build up our gateways, our tech, and get that foundation. And soon we're going to learn how to build other unit compositions. Oh wait, Jimmy! To the Protoss. We're back to Protoss on this. Yeah. Is it more important to max out or get damage armor upgrades? Oh, that was a good question. Almost always weapons first. Followed by armor and then shields. I think it's better to get +1 shields than +3 armor, but at that point you probably have the money for both. So, weapons are the priority, because overall Protoss units benefit a lot more because many of them scale more. Weapon upgrades can increase your weapon damage by more than 1. They scale based on the damage of the attacks. And since almost all Protoss units have strong attacks, they usually get a significant amount of extra damage from the upgrades. Whereas armor and shield upgrades only reduce damage by 1 each. So occasionally you'll see some pros go for like armor upgrades first with charge lots. But overall the defensive upgrades aren't that helpful because shields only work when you have the shields. Armor only works when your shields are gone. It's usually better to just hit harder than take more hits. And is it worth building your second forge? Your first forge, by about 6 minutes. We're usually getting that around 45 to 50 probes. Your Twilight Council and your second forge, when your first upgrade's halfway done. By the time it finishes, we're getting those. So that way we can get +2, +1. And add on more tech, because we're starting out with Robo Bay. We will be getting the Twilight and the second forge more quickly with Charge Lot, Immortal, Archon. The idea is we're building up the basics here, and then we'll add more on later. All right, and with all that boring stuff said, it's time for a quick advertisement. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, I'm Winter, and I'm here to talk to you about Prime Gaming. Prime Gaming. Do you have Amazon Prime? We know. You have Amazon Prime. If you have Amazon Prime, though, hypothetically, you can get so many exciting things with Prime Gaming. Yes, Amazon Prime. We don't have everything you need in your life, but we're working on it. Prime Gaming. When Amazon swallowed Twitch whole several years ago, it shit out Prime Gaming, and now at gaming.amazon.com every single month for free, you can get exciting loot for your favorite games. Do you like League of Legends? I'm sorry. Do you like GTA Online? Well, you can get $400,000 a month in GTA Online, which I assume can afford at least 12 bullets. Do you like Roblox? I see you're a discerning individual, much like myself. Oh, Roblox, you can get new skins as well. Remember New World? Yikes, right? But wait, there's more. Did you know that every single month every single month for free, you can subscribe to a streamer of your choice, or even me. Yes, and don't even think about it. Just do it, because every moment you wait to use that free Prime Gaming subscription, you're losing money for me. So subscribe with Prime Gaming, because what do you have to lose? Those Roblox skins, those New World skins, they can't wait. And neither can subscribe. And that, if that's not enough, remember here at Amazon Prime, we know where you live. You told us. Good luck, and good night. Thank you guys for sticking around. We're going to try a slightly different build next game. We're going to start adding in those different options, because Protoss is very much obligated to have more specific builds because of, like what I said. There are certain things you need to do every game, and it's easy to miss. Unlike Terran, where you literally can't build medevacs without a starport. But it's easy to accidentally skip a lot of things like charge or upgrades for Protoss because you can get the basic units.
Love the low APM content. Thanks for doing it.
Glad you enjoy, and well, I'll be right back. Thank you for watching. We got about 5 more games lined up, give or take. And we'll get right back to it. Thank you for watching. Twilight it is. Thank you, Garion.
Is that all?
Garwanon is chilling for 70 months.
Azure.
Oh,
We're gonna
good.
test out that
Now
Walloff.
I have your attention.
Rainchian is chilling for 1 month.
Thank you, Rainzy.
You got this.
Any tips for
One way or
PvZ that isn't just micro better? Feel like early game tanks destroy all my momentum. I don't think Zerg has tanks, though. That would be a nice buff. Do you mean versus Terran? I think a lot of players delay their production too long. That's one of the major things I see a lot
Is that all?
Physic
from
is
lower
chilling
metal
for 7
leagues
months.
is not adding enough gateways, not getting tech in a timely manner, and then when tanks show up, you got a handful of stalkers and like a void ray or something like that, which just isn't really what you're looking for a lot of the time. I think just having your production on point and essentially just using one observer to see any units coming out is a key. So he does have a spawning pool done, but notice he has no larva. He actually can't have any units right now. I'm just gonna get my Nexus and not worry about my build. Because, I mean, I'm going to worry about my build, but I'm not going to worry about Zerglings being in my base quite yet. Because
They're attacking your base.
he just doesn't have any ability to build them.
Your base is under attack.
I see a couple Lings now. I'm going to build a Zealot. We very quickly get to test out this Walloff.
Oh, a follower. Is that
Gonna get a
all?
second pylon just to
Xmas
make
in
sure we
Nevada
got
is
it.
chilling for 1 month.
And I'm just gonna keep this probe near the wall. Get a second geyser. Cybercore is done. We're gonna build a shield better. In any game where your opponent is going for essentially one base, we're gonna get that shield better. So a very key point here, I have enough space to build a gateway behind the Zealot. So that, I know the people said Twilight, but in this scenario, a Stargate is the choice. That is, a Stargate is the correct choice. Because Zerg players, much to their dismay, don't have any anti-air options besides Queens early on. So if he does an all-in, he doesn't walk his Queens across with it, of which he can't have that many, then a Void Ray will shut it all down. Just one Void Ray will solve most of your problems there. And should you leave your probe at the wall? Honestly, I think you should just have it there against Zerg. I think it's a good habit. I wish I did it more. I lose games because of it. Alright, I'm just kind of scouting with the Adept. Shift, right click, I know, micro, but I'm gonna now ignore it. Alright. That Adept is dead. He built some more Zerglings, he's getting a lair. As I'm building the Void Ray, we're gonna get pylons in the main.
Research is done. Your forces are just a little bit better.
I'm going to get a sentry. I might need a force field here. The Void Ray is for defense. I'm just gonna have it right near the ramp, and here's your Twilight. Now this is something that is pretty unique to Protoss, but is being able to go for multiple tech paths, just because your tech is so strong compared to everything else. And your gateway units are very relatively weak compared to your tech units. And that is essentially what Protoss is designed and balanced around, for better or worse. So a robotics facility, a Twilight Council. We're going to add on a forge. And how many probes? I'm going to actually just queue up the probes. Make sure we have enough. And from here, we're adding gateways. Gonna go up 6 gateways. Get that observer. I'm gonna queue up a second observer. First observer going across. Get 3 in each gas. I've started charge. We're gonna start +1 attack. Get a few more pylons. Chrono boost. All these are good choice. Upgrades are always a great choice for Chrono. Tech buildings. At this point, there's really no reason for me to Chrono boost probes, as I have enough probes for 2 bases, but I don't have a 3rd, which I'm taking now. As I get the gas, I'm starting a Templar Archives. Whoop. Observer probes. This observer, I'll stay at home. Shield battery at the back, cannon at the front.
But I'm still waiting on high-sec auto tracking.
I'm building Immortals. Setting up a camera location. I'm gonna get a 2nd sentry, and then the rest of my gas will be used.
You're all mined out that mineral field.
It's gonna be used for Archons, which we just finished that Templar Archives. I'm actually gonna queue this up. Triforce and Spotter Pylons. Make sure to build the Archons outside, because if you built your wall right, Archons can't get through it because they're too thick.
Mini Galadriel
Which is
chilling for 24
quite annoying,
months.
to be honest. But it is important to consider. Thank you. Archons are like a half size larger. They're just plus size units, alright? Immortals and Stalkers can still get through a well-designed wall, but Archons just can't. And if you made the wall large enough for Archons to get through, imagine how easy it'll be for Zerglings. So I'm gonna get a Warp Prism now.
Nice.
And how many gates do we have? Not enough. Let's go to 10. That's round 10. Close. We're at 75 probes. Very good. Warp in more zealots. Spotter pylon probe. And then we'll just queue it up to go to the watchtower. Another Nexus. As we're easily at enough probes. Chrono. I'm gonna hotkey the Warp Prism on 2. I usually use my main army on 1. Specialty units, which is usually the probe, like a builder probe early, and then a Warp Prism on 2, and then main spellcasters like Templar or Disruptors on 3, or just air units, like if you've got carriers or Void Rays or something. Triforce. we're gonna get 2 more Robos and well, I already have a Stargate. I remember now. So in case I need it. Rapid fire. Yes, I know. Inflates the APM, but the entire point is to do it as quickly as possible. And that's the beauty of the rapid fire option. Alright. He's got a lot of banelings, which Archons ain't afraid of. 8-click. Upgrade's about to finish. I'm going to send the Warp Prism into the main.
Upgrade complete. But at
And
what
this is
cost?
how your ideal game will hopefully end.
Your warriors are under attack.
Not with Zealots dying like it's the Legacy of the Void trailer, but a warp into the main, right click.
You engage the enemy? You took all the minerals from that cluster, you thief.
Oh, he's got Mutas. So, a lot of people get scared of me, but the counter to Mutas is a good offense. If you max out quickly, like if he rushes out Mutas, it's gonna get a little annoying to defend. You probably need some Stalkers, build some Cannons. But remember, we did start with the Stargate, so could have gone Phoenixes as well. It's just that the majority of players, they will not be able to put together Mutas or use them very effectively well before you can max out and go. So that was pretty much a pure macro build, and the limit was 60 for silver. 1 per second on average. And that's what that looks like. Now, obviously adding some more details to go above it, but yeah, super pylons. Couldn't squeeze out 1 more APM. It was nice of him to stay in the game for 5 or 10 seconds after the GG. Otherwise, I might have owed you guys. But here we are. Collusion. Not that either of us knew how much APM was going to be, but yeah, so the key there was I scouted out a spawning pool. Which, yes, very scary. But the second most important key was don't panic. I don't think you necessarily need to be counting larvae every time. A good habit to get into is just being confident in the Walloff. Just all you do, if it is an early pool, is you complete the Walloff quicker. You stop building quite as many probes, and you make sure that wall is set up. But you still build it in the same way, and that's a key point.
I'm sure
So
this
practicing
one will
that wall, like how we did earlier, is, like I said, the most efficient use of your time. Honestly, walling off like that against Protoss is okay as well. Though it's probably better to just wall off on your main base. But getting in the habit of it is alright. So this is a random player, which means there's a 1 in 3 chance that he's Zerg. Random players are troublesome, but so we are on Curious Minds. There's a ramp to the natural. Any map with a ramp to the natural, it makes it a lot easier to have a safe wall. So he has a... Here's the trick. Hold position allows you to block the assimilator, because an assimilator is technically larger than the gas geyser. So if you hold position, he can't build it there because there's something blocking. Also, he can't build it there if you build an assimilator first. There's that. Important to know. I should go scout him, though. He sent that probe out early. Classic Protoss. Builds a pylon at my natural. I'll probably just build a zealot to get rid of it. That's fine. But I mean, we're already committed here, so. Get a second pylon. So this pylon in my main. So this is something a lot of Protoss players, random or otherwise, will do. Protoss players really more than others, and this is for the Zergs and Terrans out there. You know more than most. They like to get up in your grill and be annoying. All right, it's a lifestyle choice, really. And I mean, I couldn't help it. He started it. So, but a lot of Protoss players will get so focused on that. It's kind of like an advanced version of microing your Reaper as Terran. They'll worry so much. Build another pylon. Do it. Or not. Well, that was the extent of his build. I blocked his base, inspired by his activities. I was inspired by his activities there. But well, he started it. It's obviously best to practice with real players. I could upgrade my macro mod for newer players. It yells at you if you're supply blocked or floating money. I don't think that's necessarily a bad resource. Is it you can use it against the AI? Alright. Oh, platinum border on this one. Now, I want to point something out. It is important to note that the border...
One way or another.
Wait, I think this was actually fixed. So it might not be true anymore. But there was a time when the border of a player, like if they have a platinum or a diamond border, they might... That isn't necessarily the race they're currently playing. Like, they could be platinum as Terran and silver as Protoss. It's not as rare as you'd think. But I do believe that was fixed. I'm not... Random players have never had a border. Random players never had one. Right? There are dozens of us. And in Masters, when it shows your MMR, not for random players, there are dozens of us. So, that has always been a thing. But at the lower levels, on average, below Masters, random is about 10% of games played. Masters, it is around 4%. GM is whenever Pig's playing, pretty much. At least on NA. So... Let's go get that Cyber Core. He started his Cyber Core already. So, I'm just trying to get used to walling off the low ground here, which is important to be competent-ish at. Once again, another Protoss, another player very interested in making my day annoying. So the big thing I'm going to want is a shield battery. I usually would say tech first is the most important. And that's still true. That's still going to be important. There are probes everywhere. Come on in. What else is important is building your second pylon. I think someone at some point said something profound about building second pylons. But I'm not sure who it was. So, this is pretty bad. I'll be honest with you. It is pretty bad. Oh, and an adept he goes with. Pretty smart move. This is going to be quite annoying to deal with. That is the big weakness of not having the wall on the high ground, is not being able to shield battery block. Well, actually, you can still do it. Like, you can still go with the shield battery blocking maneuver. But... And speaking of shield batteries, I'm going to get one in the main. Why? Because against Protoss, Oracles are a threat. Stargate units in general. One Adept can get countered by a shield battery because it can't one-shot probes. Well, that's a Void Ray in my base. Appears he proxied his, so... He charged up his Void Ray. Well, here we are. And here we are. So the only counter to a bad dude with Void Rays is a good dude with more Void Rays. And a supply block. So Void Rays are kind of an awkward unit. Because they can lock on. It's just, it isn't the same sort of lock on like a Cyclone. It is only when they're facing a certain direction does it work. So if you, it's actually, the Void Ray in all its beauty is an anti-micro unit. Because if you micro it too much, you deny yourself the ability to use that lock-on. I'm actually going to put my Void Rays on Control 3 here. There's a reason I opened with Stargate. It really is the only reliable... There's a reason you see so much Stargate at these lower levels as well. And not the lower levels, at the high levels, rather. It's because it has so much utility overall. It essentially, the Stargate is defense, offense, scouting, like... It is a little finicky to use, yeah, but overall it covers all your bases. I don't recommend it as an opener against Terran. It's not really necessary. Against Zerg, opening with just a single Void Ray is very powerful. Against Protoss, I mean, it's hard to tell what the best option against Protoss is. PvP. At the lower levels, PvP makes more sense than it does the further up you go, actually. Because it does kind of become a game of confusing poker, where everybody has the same cards, but they can play them in slightly different order. Or they can pretend like they have other cards, or like, none of the... Anyway, so this is happening. Oh, he has Blink. Oh. Which might actually be enough here. The charged up Void Rays are obviously very good. He did expand, too. Like, if he hadn't gone for that, I think he was perfectly fine to continue. But, so that was a mess. So we did go. He was platinum with 200 actions per minute. We're technically in silver, but since it was a pretty confidently platinum player, I believe that what is the requirement for platinum? It's 80. But in the spirit of it, I will gift one to the people. In the spirit. Jimmy, bring us. Let's move on. Yeah, we're still in kind of the calibration matches. I thought we wouldn't have this, but you're kind of seeing the range of players that you can play before you've played. Because right now I'm still gaining or losing around 50 MMR per match. The system just isn't super confident. I am where I'm supposed to be. It's kind of right.
Good. Now I have your attention.
Winter Gaming is now chilling.
No, no. Has gifted one. It doesn't even say who to. It just says, okay, well, whatever.
Oh, here we go again.
Well, we got another Protoss versus Protoss. And we're really going to try to nail down the build here. And yes, I am going to continue to expand on the low ground and be vulnerable to these shenanigans. But it is the best way to learn and train yourself to not panic, essentially. Like, when people see you doing this, they will try to attack you, especially Protoss. But you're actually better equipped to handle it because you're already defending the location you wanted to be anyway. Especially as Protoss, who has things like shield battery overcharge, and super pylons. Having that location already established makes it a lot easier than trying to fight down a ramp and take it. I get the gases. Wait. No, we're not. I said we're going to nail down the build, and then I proceeded to not do that. So there are two options. Either our friend here is AFK, or he's doing a proxy gate. But based on the fact he doesn't seem to be building anything, I believe he is AFK. So, we're going to use this. Not just outright kill him. Going to use this as an opportunity to max out as quickly as possible here. Maybe he comes back. If the game just ends, alright, well then we know what happened. I'm going to try to do the basics. So, second base after Cybercore. Second pylon in the main. Rallying to gas. Not that the rallying, not that important overall, but helpful. Warp gate, adept. Yeah, I predict he comes back in about 2 minutes. Sometimes you get these. Second pylon finishes, chrono boost probes. Since we're being fancy, I'm gonna rally both down. And this is going to be a robo build. This is going to be a, I'm confident I don't need a Stargate for Void Rays. Like, say the Protoss or Terran on the other side is expanding, which usually you can see with the probe, or you can see they're on one gas, and that's your tell. We're going to get that robo. Going to get 2 more gateways. Going to be bold here. And chrono boost more probes out. Start a stalker. And now to be clear, against Zerg, I would have fallen off on the low ground. We're just doing essentially the... This is more of a Protoss versus Terran, but not necessarily. It could be Protoss versus Protoss. You can do Robo against Zerg, but Stargate is just a lot safer. Gonna get my third Nexus now, as Warp Gate is finishing. Alright, Mineral Walk through. Start my Twilight Council. So the goal is to have maxed out army with +2 attack. Charge lot, Immortal Archon. 75 probes, 10 to 12 gates, 1 or 2 robos, +2 attack, as quick as possible. I think. Therefore I am. Alright, and we're going back. So I got 2 observers. We're getting +1. Get the Triforce. And actually set that up down here too. We're at full saturation. Add the gases. So the APM counter is frozen after the game ends. So that is no longer... We're still going to... I mean, I know the speed. But we're still gonna take it slow. But this is cutting some corners here. This is not really building that much off the warp gates early. This is taking an earlier third than maybe you always want to do. So I will get a cannon battery set up. So now, if you're being extra greedy, what you can do is wait until about 60 probes. Now, I know, getting the 60 probes reliably is already a big accomplishment. But at 60 probes, then you can do the gateway explosion. Right about there. Which is like 6, 7, 8 more gates. And the Templar Archives. Chrono boost, that +1. Start another immortal. The ideal is 4 or 5 immortals. 5 immortals, we'll say. 5 archons, and then a bunch of charge lots. That's the army.
Enough research is done. Your forces are just a little bit better.
Now, +2 attack. So we're mining this. Fill in some pylons. Spotter pylons as well. More immortals. We're at 3. Working on more. Get the Triforce. Add some more on. I'd be adding a 4th Nexus, along with the trimmings of pylons there. One more immortal. Chrono boost on the forge.
Mineral patch is gone, and it's not coming back.
I'm going to queue up an observer after it. That observer's for the army. I'd probably build like a gateway or something. This pylon would probably be a little further, more like over here. But this is for counterattacking without needing to use a warp prism. Though having a warp prism is also great. Like, that's also good.
You took all the minerals.
Could use
from
a
that
couple more
cluster,
gates.
Pete.
Especially with a 4th coming in. So we're mining out of the main. Move some probes over. Gonna get a warp prism. +2 is about to finish. So now at about 180. So the ideal, we're at about 930. If you can get it, before 11 minutes, honestly. Remember, this is with cutting a few corners, no pressure, and I'm playing, so we're not gonna be there. But now, attack into wherever the nearest base is. Like that, if it's a Zerg, they're probably taking a 4th. If it's a Terran or a Protoss, they might just be on 3 bases.
A mineral field has been
So,
completed.
what I would do is warp in either at one of these or a warp prism. Essentially, you give them a jab to the side and then you hit them directly in the face. That's the plan. Because they turn into the jab, which is 10, 12 zealots or whatever, with the warp prism in the main or the third. And then they turn back right in the face. And you can do all that before 10 minutes. A lot of players struggle to even get a third base before 10 minutes. You can max out, punch them in the face before then. And you probably won't be facing those players for long, if that's the case. But I put this on the precipice here. I think with that, because I don't want to step into the golden halls quite yet. And we're at over 3 hours here. And while there were some awkward games, and Protoss in general is less focused around a specific build and more of making smart decisions and not panicking early on, I think we learned a lot. So, that actually, for now, is going to wrap up day 1 of the Protoss Low APM Challenge. Next time, we'll be scraping at gold. But that does not end right now. We still have, of course, Q&A, where I will try to answer your questions as wholly as possible. And I will take questions from all the races, but prioritize Terran. No, not prioritize Terran. I'm sorry, Terran's paid me to say that. But I'll prioritize Protoss. And then I will see you next time. But let's see those questions. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you're still awake and you're still feeling like I want to learn more and you have a question you'd like answered, well, I will be taking the questions from the comments and trying to answer them in later videos, because there's not too much of a gap. Might miss 1 or 2, but hopefully by the next time one goes up. So, you guys know everything. You know how to play Protoss perfectly. No more questions. Nothing left to ask. And let me bring up the lesson plans for a moment. We're going to be going over, by the way, we're going to be going over basic micro, which is going to include things like force fields and storm, as well as warp prism usage, is going to be our next episode. We're going to talk about when you actually need to change your unit composition and when you just need to adjust how you move it. Like, for example, if your opponent is going for mutas or for battle cruisers or something, and you're going for immortals, you're probably going to need to switch it up. But if they're going for lurkers, you don't necessarily need to change.
New
Stuff like that.
detected.
Thank you, Anders.
Anders is chilling for 4
we're gonna
months.
we're gonna
Thanks
get a
for
little more
educating us
matchup
noobs.
specific. Like in
Lesson 3.
Protoss versus Protoss, probably start with 2 gate openers. Protoss versus Terran, setting up the base slightly differently so that way you can defend and expand safely. And then against Zerg, just nailing down the Walloff. That's coming up next on top of everything else so far. But what race would you recommend if I'm having trouble remembering build orders? Well, I think it's not so much about remembering build orders, but the race that you need to remember the most specific ones is Terran. But I think a lot of people think of build orders as like 16 barrack, 17 refinery, 20 reaper, 21 reactor, 20 orbital, like 36 starport or whatever. But it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. I think it's important to tie it into anchors in general, and that's what I try to do. I think the best one, because it's tied to everything else, is the worker count. You can hover over. All you have to do is hover your mouse over the top right, the supply, and you can see your worker count. Because the more workers you have, the more money you get, and that's used to pay for everything else, right? So instead of worrying about exactly this time or this supply, though you can do that, just remembering to build workers, and then, like, for example, for Terran, 30 workers, 3 production facilities, 3 racks, going up towards 3 factories. For Protoss, 40 workers, 2 more gases. 50 workers, more gates. Stuff like that. For Zerg, it's going to be similar, though not the same. Zerg is a little more complicated. Zerg actually has the least reliance on exact builds, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's simple. It just requires a pretty significantly different mindset. That's why Zerg feels tough for newer players to wrap their heads around early on, just because while Protoss and Terran share a lot of similarities, Zerg just simply doesn't. So, are Mutas or Corruptors a better counter to Colossi? Corruptors are technically better, but the best counter is learning to use Vipers. For having 4 Vipers and using them well, or even kind of okay, is better than investing in things like air units that you're probably just going to fly into Archons. So we have to do math. If you count math as reading a number and saying whether that number is higher, lower, or the same as the number you're thinking about, then yes, you do have to do math. It's like, is the number 40? No, it's 36. I have no idea what to do now. Well, I'm sure someone on YouTube can help you with that. Some people building shield batteries in the mineral lines, is this a better option than a photon cannon? Well, the reason you'll see shield batteries a lot are because you just don't have a forge as early. I think for your outlying bases, it's better to have a cannon in the mineral line. I actually earlier on explained how to place it and where in order to be effective without blocking your mining. But early on, you literally just don't have a forge. So a shield battery covering your mineral line is the replacement, usually in your first and second base. Maybe your third as well. But past that, cannons take a little more precedence. Does Protoss have the best cheese / creative attacks? No. And also, that's subjective. But in my opinion, no.
I have your attention.
It's...
chilling.
I'm not... I'll be honest. Like, while players like Haz and Zest, I think Zerg has the best cheese in creative attacks because it's so much harder to do it. Because Zerg just doesn't really have the options early. So when players like Bly will do a proxy hatch or even like a proxy spine crawler sort of thing, it impresses me more because of how much harder it is to pull off. Terran and Protoss can just build their buildings anywhere. So you're not impressing me by building a Stargate out on the map. Okay, it's been done. It's been done. Now proxying a spawning pool, on the other hand. Now you have my attention. But Protoss probably does have, because of their strong units, have the best options to kind of just win. And that's why people hate Protoss, is because when you lose to Protoss, a lot of the time it feels like you couldn't do anything about it because either you didn't scout perfectly or because these units are very hard to deal with. And that is sometimes true. But they're also somewhat brittle in that if you do scout or you do see what's coming and you know how to respond to it, like a cannon rush, there's not many options. You're kind of stuck. Like, you can't just build Marines like Terran. You can't just build Queens like Zerg. Void Rays are not the be-all, end-all, believe it or not, as they just are quite poor against Queens or Marines. So, I think Protoss is the thinking man's race. Terrans like to pretend, but Terran is actually not the thinking man's race. No. Terran is for people who like grinding out games to have the perfect build and exactly this exact timing with this exact number of units. Because you can't really deviate much because that's how the Terran build orders work. Because you have to build each thing one at a time, one after another. Zerg just simply doesn't have the options. But Protoss, it's a jambalaya. Okay? It takes some serious thought, and that's why players like Showtime are very impressive. It takes some serious thought of like, do I need to add a Twilight earlier in order to get things like Charge or Blink? Or can I invest in another base? Or do I add more gates now, or can I sneak out a few more probes and get the gates a little later because I'm not going to either have the money or need the warpins? Like, there is no, this time I do exactly this thing. Like, I'm trying to give you guys benchmarks, but you saw from even what I was doing. It's a lot more like throwing things in the stew and hoping it comes together. Though, obviously, there are some core ingredients to that. Why do Protoss have gateway explosions? Why not adding one or two each time? That's actually a pretty good question. The simple version is because you don't need to queue up, and you can't queue up units. The other races do have production explosions as well. Like Terran will be adding on 2 to 4 more barracks at a time. They rarely add on 1 more barracks. Zerg usually has rounds of drones followed by rounds of units. So it's not that unique in that. It's just more pronounced because of how Warp Gate works and how the production can't be queued up. So there's no reason to get it earlier than you can really afford it. It just works out a lot better. I'm trying to like really pin down why. It's just usually you just do things in waves in StarCraft, and Protoss and Zerg especially, because they're a little different in how their production works, they spike a little more than Terran does. Because Terran, remember, is just for people who, with all due respect, think of accounting as an exciting profession. Yeah, a lot of Terrans think they're going to grow up to be Maru, but let's be honest and aim for Cure. That's what I try to do. In fact, Cure has almost 100 less APM than Maru. If we're doing the low APM challenge, Cure has nearly a full average Diamond League APM less than Maru. But yet, Maru is not the GSL champion. So, I mean, he has been like 5 times, but not the last time. Important point. Mostly because Maru keeps running into Zest. Yeah, Maru actually completely fucking dunked on Cure. He styled on him. It was sad. Maru in TVT he's playing a different race. Like, it was disgusting. So, but the point is, Cure is still better than almost everyone else. And he barely, in fact, it's amusing. Why am I talking about Terran again? This Terran's taking up all the attention. You see, that's what they are. They're attention whores. Yeah, I thought this year for I Am Katowice, like, I like to focus on content creation. I decided to let some new players have a shot. So I won't be playing this year. But I wish the best of luck to those who are. Yeah. So, like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Yeah. I think I'm one of the most humble players out there as well. That's definitely something. So, more questions. We still got a few more minutes. And, let me get, we'll get the other, in case you've gotten this far, but you're still not sure. You're going to check out all of them. We haven't yet, as of this time, done Zerg, so honestly, as I've been talking about, Zerg is very different. There's new things to learn, and we're going to spend most of the time in the earlier leagues learning those things. Queens, larvae, and creep. All the same thing, but all very different. Hatcheries, hotkeys, and all that. And avoiding bad habits. Pretty much all of the Bronze League and just the basic time is going to be making sure you understand what things are and how not to screw it up too bad, right? And then, even before we have a basic build, like, that's kind of what this is about. And my Bronze to Master, such as it is less about giving you a build and saying, go get to Platinum and then maybe you'll learn something. It's about giving you the ability to get better. Mostly because, one, it'd be intensely boring for me to give you a build order to copy-paste into your games that will probably get you pretty far, but you'll have no idea why. And two, like, that's not how I learn either. I never learned. What I would do, and what I do to this day to learn, is I'll see something I like. I'll see a strategy or a style of playing that I like. Whether it's like Showtime or Cure, or Serral, and I'll get an idea, and then I'll go do it myself. Now, obviously, have a lot of experience, so early on though, I watched Day 9, and a bunch of pro games early on, and essentially I was playing like 8 hours a day. So, and then watching GSL and 240p at night. And then sleeping through class. But so I'm trying to give you the distilled version of that experience. So that way you don't, like, maybe you have something I like to call responsibilities or a real job. Something like that. And you can't spend 8 hours and all night watching or playing StarCraft. So I'm trying to cut out about 6 of those hours with this stuff. I'm taking the tens of thousands of games of my experience, and while I might not be the best player, I'm better than the vast majority, and I think I'm pretty good at explaining the simpler concepts. That is something I think a lot of pro players historically, unfortunately for me as a content creator, there are a lot more pro players who really understand the Silver League mindset now. Like, you got Hearthstone and Lambo and players like Uthermal and Vindicta, who now understand that not everyone starts in the Diamond League and is a temporarily embarrassed mid-GM. But there was a time, a golden time for me, when they didn't, or at least they didn't care. But I do understand your troubles, because I'm a pretty low APM player myself, even at the higher levels. So, as I get older, and we all get older, working smarter, not harder, is more important. I don't know. Where did it start? What was my point? Oh yeah, I'm not spoon-feeding you builds. You can go slurp it out of someone else's hand. I'm sure someone has one of those. And I still recommend, like, if you're trying to figure out which race to play, I recommend playing each race to level 10. Yes, there are levels in the game that don't do anything, but technically you can get XP and all that. Play to level 10. And see which one's your favorite. Focus on that. I think you should spend 3/4 of your time focused on... Level 10's like 15, 20 games or so. So about 3/4 of your time you should focus on one race. Whatever one you think is coolest, whatever one you decide to main. And then, let's say, I think a good goal for early on is 20 games a week. Sounds like a lot, but let's be honest, like, you want to do something that's difficult and takes a lot of preparation and practice, and you're not willing to put 4 or 5 hours a week in, you're not going to get much better, alright? Go enjoy Direct Strike. But you can't expect to get any better at a relatively complicated and physical. It's not just mental, it is physical as well. Like, your hands only move so fast. You can be a chess grandmaster probably until you're 80... No, until you're dead. Because you don't need much APM for chess. At least most versions. But it is kind of like exercising, or so I hear from people who do. Like, if you just don't at least put a little bit of time in on a regular basis, it's going to be difficult every time. And that's why I think it's better, like, if you can, I know not everybody can do this, but it's much better to play 5 games a day, 3 times a week, than play 20 games in one day. If you had to choose, I'd rather you play 5 games 3 times a week than 20, or even 25 games in a single day. Because you'll learn more over time. It'll be easier to focus. Now, if you play less than, like, 3 in a day, you're going to come back with, like, well, every game I play, it feels like I'm warming up. That's because you are. Usually, at least 2 or 3 games is about the minimum. Otherwise, every game will feel like your first game of the day, because it kind of is. Do you have a trick or tip to use more minimap? I'm going to go ahead and share this one. I don't know. I'd like to hear some results on this. But the best I've seen is to, against the AI, and maybe in your games, is to just patrol a worker between the corner bases. Every map has corner bases of some sort. Patrol a worker like you're the AI, say, between these 3 bases on either side. The intent of this being not necessarily to scout anything, but to have that your eye drawn by the movement on the minimap. Because the vision, you know how it works on the minimap. You'll see it just moving around. So that will just train you more and more to be looking over there. And occasionally when you look over there, it'll be because an enemy unit is. I actually think this is a really good idea. I don't have any better tips. My tip was just play more games and eventually you get used to it. But at least that's something you can do, right? That's kind of the same as putting all those spotter pylons that I've been doing, but a little more active, so at least that way you're thinking about it as well. Also a click instead of patrol. A click instead of patrol. No, patrol. The entire point is you have things constantly moving around the minimap. And it draws your attention occasionally. How do you improve with micro? That's a very big question. Practice. There are several micro trainers. I think another thing is being willing to lose. Of course, I'll be the first one to tell you that micro is not very important, and you can easily get to diamond without ever looking at your units attacking. You won't win every game, but you could win 3/4 with only F2 A-click, or at least close to it. But at the same time, and we'll be going over it in the gold league of each race, basic micros important. Like for Terran, splitting your Marines, not splitting your Marines, but when to stim your bio units, how not to fly your medevacs over the enemy units. For Protoss, this is sentries in general. It is using not 1, but 2 types of spellcasters, like sentries and, I know it sounds crazy, but Templar. Very basic blink micro. For Zerg, this is Queens in general. Dealing with splash damage and Vipers. Honestly, micro, I think for the mid-tier, should be more about using key spellcasters more than doing the flashy, like, blinks or splits or, like, target fire that you'll see pros do. I think a lot of people think of micro and they think of Maru splitting Marines. But they don't think of Maru not losing his medevacs to Stalkers because he doesn't fly them over the high ground the Marines can't walk. They don't think about that. That's Cure Micro right there. And then he walks all his Marines into Banelinks. But he builds more, and that's the key point. Alright. Zerg's, when moving out for a roach timing attack, at 200 supply, I'm not a huge fan of roach timings, but against Protoss, you're looking for when their third is finishing, ideally. If they're not taking a third, you're kind of just doing a roach all-in, not a timing attack. Alright. Well, some good questions. I'm gonna go throw it to YouTube again and say I am reading the comments, and I'll be collecting those questions for later episodes. I hope this was educational. I hope it was entertaining. I hope it was both. But at the very least, I hope it made your day and your games a little bit better. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Stay chill.